Okay, the House Committee on Elections will now come to order, and clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Lavenberg.
Here.
Vice Chairman Goldman.
Here.
Representative Reynolds. Representative Fallon.
Here.
Representative Israel. Representative Phelan. Representative Schofield.
Here.
Okay, quorum present?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, quorum is present, and I know Representative Reynolds is on his way. He's had a little car trouble, so he will be here, and we'll recognize him when he's here. And just want to comment that it is the Speaker who has set the interim charges and with the recommendations from the committee members. And so we are here today to address these interim charges. And we are hearing invited testimony only because it's to give us suggestions, policy ideas, to study what the issues will be next session, potentially, because there is no specific legislation at hand right now. We are just doing invited testimony. So, but you're certainly, if you're here to observe, you're certainly welcome to put your comments in the witness affirmation system, and if you need help on that, we have my assistant down at the end, Suzanne Bowers. She can help you if you have any trouble. So, having said that, Vice Chair Goldman, do you have any comments?
Glad to be back.
Yeah, we're getting ready to gear up. Any other comments, members?
Honor and privilege.
Okay, so today the first item that we're going to look at is charge number 2, and that is to study and develop recommendations to improve the integrity of the Texas voter registration rolls in an effort to ensure the most accurate and up-to-date voter registration rolls, including, but not limited to, the Interstate Voter Registration Cross-Check Program that was passed last session, the process by which voters are removed from the registration rolls, and the impact of being removed from jury duty due to citizenship status, what this has on an individual voter registration, on an individual's voter registration, and ways to educate voters about updating their address when they move. So, with that, we have 2 panels. The first panel will be, if y'all would like to come up, is Bill Fairbrother, the legislative chair of the Texas Republican County Chairman's Association, and Glenn Maxey with the Texas Democrat Party. And thank y'all for being here. And y'all signed your witness affirmation forms.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I also want to comment that we have agency resource witnesses, members, if y'all have any questions. I believe we have the Secretary of State here and someone from the AG's office, the Ethics Commission, and I believe Department of Public Safety. If y'all are here, if you want to just sort of wave your hand and let us know. Okay, we see a few. So if you have any questions, we can call them up. All right. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And who would like to begin? Do you want me to pick?
Sure.
I'll pick you, Bill.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Laubenberg and committee members. Again, my name is Bill Fairbrother, and I serve as Legislative Director for the Texas Republican County Chairman's Association, as well as Chairman of the Williamson County Republican Party. We applaud the efforts in the last several sessions to improve voter registration rolls and clean up the rolls. We fully support the Interstate Voter Registration Cross-Check Program. We have one specific legislative recommendation in regards to jury panels being excused from jury service. Currently, the only person informed of such people is the district clerk. We'd like that law expanded to inform the voter registrar, election administrator, county clerk of those people as well, since those people should not theoretically be voting if they've sworn to not be a citizen. And extending that list to those folks we think would help improve elections.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Glenn Maxey, representing the Texas Democratic Party. today's charge about keeping the voter registration rolls up to date and accurate, I think, is a very timely one, as we're a matter of weeks away from another voter registration deadline for a general election. Hundreds of thousands of people will be added to the rolls in the coming weeks, and in most cases, or the majority of those, are probably people who are simply changing or updating an address. We're in a highly mobile society. If you look across the country today, Texas has the fifth highest number of renters in the nation. Statistics now show that the average American will move 11.4 times in their life, and most people by the age of 30 have already moved 6 times. So keeping voter registration rolls is accurate is a huge challenge. So I will offer a few suggestions. Number one, last session, Representative Israel brought forth a piece of legislation that ultimately had a significant majority of both Democrats and Republicans in the House signed on to allow online voter registration. I think the time has come. 37 states now do that. It's the most efficient, it's the most accurate, it's the most user-friendly way to get people registered to vote and keep the registration rolls accurate. We're now in a highly technological society, allowing people to both register to vote and update their voter registration through online voter registration, I think should be our number one priority. Secondly, there are lots of ways to intercede with these people who are moving. We now know that the majority of people who register to vote in Texas are those who are updating their driver's license. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the consumer, but unfortunately for voter registration, people are only updating their driver's license, or required to, every 6 years. And we all know that just because you move doesn't mean people go to update their voter registration, because they have to pay a fee and to do so, and that keeps people from procrastinating about doing that. If we were to expand to other
I'm sorry, Glenn, you pay the fee to renew your driver's license.
Yes.
Yeah, not the voter, yeah.
To renew your driver's license, and that's where the update of the voter registration typically happens. So that has been the number one place where people are updating driver's license, voter registration. We should encourage, and I don't know how we would mandate, but encourage public-private partnerships. The places where people are actually changing an address and they're intersecting with government are through mortgage companies, through title companies, and through apartment leases. If we were to encourage or prod those three entities who already have all of the information that goes on a voter registration card to simply print out a registration application when they did a title or an apartment lease, hand it to the voter with the address to mail it, we would probably keep the voter registration rolls a lot more accurate. It is in a community like Austin, where there are 6-month leases that sort of follow the semesters at the university. We have a significant number of people who get a first month rent-free on a 6-month lease, and so every 6 months they are popping across the street from one complex to the one across the street, back across the street, just because if you do that, you get 3 months rent-free per year. And so keeping up with those people and their voter registration and other documents accurate is a challenge. So an apartment lease would be a highly rich place to get people to update voter registration.
Okay, are you saying have like voter registration forms, applications at the leasing offices?
Well, I'm suggesting
They can do that
that
now.
we work with the state, work with a Secretary of State, work with apartment associations to have them print out as part of the lease, where you can just tear it off the back and mail it in. And that way people could optionally decide to do it, but at least it would be handed to them. I've done lots of voter registration over my years. I probably have registered over 30,000, 40,000 people over my 40 years of doing this. And the one thing I know more than anything else, it is not, people are not clamoring to go find that piece of paper to fill it out. That is the biggest challenge, is getting that piece of paper in front of them where they can fill it out. That's why giving it to them at a driver's license office, give it to them at an apartment leasing time, or giving it to them online are probably the three biggest factors in keeping the voter registration rolls accurate. And with that, that's my last comment on voter registration.
Yeah, Representative Suffield.
First, we got our packet of written testimony. Did either one of you turn in written testimony?
No.
Okay. My second question regards the interstate cross-check, and Bill, you brought it up, and Glenn, I don't think you talked about it. Do we have any feel for how that's working, or has it not been in a full cycle, so we don't have results?
I think you need the Secretary of State. You want me to call that?
No, I just wanted to know if these guys...
Because I had the same question.
Because I'll ask both panels, but I just wanted to know if you all had, from the perspective of the parties, any experience with it.
I have not heard if we've even done it yet. If it is, I am also very eager to see what the result of that is. I want to talk a little bit about out-of-state, in-state people when we talk about voter mail ballots in a second, because I'm very curious about the number of people who are we're finding that are registered in multiple states also.
Right, and now one of the things I wanted to ask the both of you about was within the state we have that, and anybody who knocks on doors knows you'll knock on a door and there'll be 2 Smiths and 3 Johnsons registered, and the Smiths will say, well, we bought the house from the Johnsons 3 years ago and they're still here. You were concerned with getting people registered in their new place when they move. I have a concomitant concern about getting them off the rolls in places where they aren't anymore. Do either of you have suggestions for how we can, and I know as we go on and we try to get more computerized and everything, there's an attempt to do this, but how do we go about getting the dead people and the folks who don't live at 123 Main Street anymore off the roll, so there's less opportunity for chicanery and people voting folks who don't live there anymore?
Well, I mean, just for the record, we have to realize what federal law is around suspense voters. Our process today is that a voter who moves is on the rolls until they update their voter registration, or until the voter registrar mails them a new voter registration card in the November or the December after a general election. That card goes to that household. If the voter is not there, has moved, that card goes back to the registrar. They're put on a suspense list where they remain for 2 federal elections for an additional 4 years. That voter can always show up during early voting or back in their original precinct and update their registration for the next 4 years and vote. I think that has protected a lot of people who do move a lot to be able to have that sort of fail-safe to get re-registered and cast a ballot. The challenge there about the fact that that's totally dependent on the U.S. Post Office, and I have a lot of gripes about how much in our election code today, both on voter registration and vote by mail, is tied to what the post office does, and the law does not follow accurately what the post office regulations are, and I can go into more detail about that. But the issue here is that if that postman leaves the voter registration card there just because it's the address that's there and people do not return it, then that person stays on the rolls. I know of many cases where a person after the age of 18 moved away from home, registered in another state or another county. I've heard these stories often. The voter registration rolls comes to Susie Smith, Susie's parents, and
How would you return it? How would you return it?
If the postman knows that the person has moved, there's a change of address, or that person, a new voter, that they take it, they just don't deliver it.
Okay, they don't deliver it, but if they do deliver it,
if they do deliver it, that's where the problems happen. So if somebody at that house does not mark not for return to send to post office.
Oh, you're talking about the whole thing. There's no stop. There's no box or anything to check to say this person no longer lives here.
Right. If they don't put
that is something that could be done.
Yeah. If the person at that residence accepts that piece of mail, throws it away, that person's staying on the list.
Now, remind me, how do we know to send it to them in the first place? I mean, historically, and again, we're getting more computerized and centralized, but historically, if I moved from Harris County to Fort Bend, no one would know I did. I register in Fort Bend. The Harris County people have no idea I've done that. I stay on the rolls at my address, and the new person who buys my house registers there, and we're both on. And we've all, again, all of us who block walk have seen this many times. What is, correct me if I'm wrong, but, or just remind me, what is the mechanism by which Harris County would have any idea to send something to my old address to find out if I'm on?
If you're an active voter, they're going to send it to the address where you're registered. And
if I'm an active voter in Fort Bend County?
I mean, in Harris County. Now, under the TEAMS program, and I think the Secretary of State's office has said to me that their new TEAMS program catches this a lot more often, that when somebody registers in a new county because of their driver's license or Social Security, they know it's the same person, then the old registration is canceled. And therefore, they're taken off of the Harris County list when they're made active in Fort Bend.
Okay.
But
to your recollection, and you've been at this a long time, prior to TEAM, there wasn't any coordination or any way to know, right? So I could move from Harris to Fort Bend out to Waller County, and I'd be on the rolls in 3 places, and no one would know to take me off.
That's correct. Up until HAVA, which is now, we're well past that, and we had 254 voter registration rolls. They were never compared, and in most cases they were paper. I'm old enough to have dealt with voter registration rolls in multiple counties where they were done by hand on a Big Chief tablet. When somebody died, their name was scratched through. When somebody registered, they hand wrote it on the bottom. And that's in my time of dealing with voter registration rolls. After HAVA, we now have a statewide database. All voter registration is still done by county, but the rolls is one team list that's statewide. And as somebody registers in a new county using those data points, they know to take them off in the old county. But there's still legacy stuff. I just in 2014, I haven't done this recently, just did a comparison, just a simple sort of rough comparison between Bastrop and Travis, and found over 1,000 people who had a registration in both counties just because their legacy from long before we were using driver's license in last 4 digits. And we're still on both rolls. So if especially this is younger people moving away, if the parents are still accepting that voter registration card when it comes, and they get it and Susie's registered to vote, they stick it on the counter and don't tell anybody. But Susie's actually registered in Travis County and voting in Travis County. I don't think, at least I've never seen any sort of voter fraud. Most of the voters who do this don't know that they are no longer registered. Now, I recall voter registration forms several decades ago where one of the boxes on it is were you previously registered in another Texas county, and you wrote that county, and that was the pet peeve for the voter registrar to send that notice to the old county to take them off the rolls. I think because of the uniform database, we don't do that because I think the belief is that we catch all of that electronically now.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Representative Powell.
Mr. Maxey, how are you, sir?
I'm great.
Okay, good. Hey, just a couple questions. When you said the raw for renters, Texas was had the fifth most renters in this country.
Texas has 14% renters, and that's the 5th highest in the
percentage,
nation.
so it is a per capita. Okay.
And the same data that I was using, some U.S. Department of Housing thing I saw found on the internet, says that Houston and Dallas have 41% renters, and they're 2 of the highest renting counties in the nation.
In the country, okay. Would you also be in favor of having some kind of voter registration form for folks that buy homes at title companies, for instance?
Exactly.
Okay.
Title companies, apartment leases.
And then in the Bastrop County and Travis, when you said there were 1,000 people that were registered in both counties, did you go any further, dig any deeper as far as seeing if any of those folks did actually vote in both counties?
I did not.
Okay. I'm just curious if you had.
But I think the Secretary of State probably can answer this, but I think their new iteration of team is a lot better at catching that, which is over time going to solve the problem of people getting off the list when they change counties.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you back in a minute. I do have a couple of questions for the Secretary of State. Keith, if you would like to come up.
Let him correct me if I was making up.
You know you will. Members of the committee, Keith Ingram here for the Elections Division, Texas Secretary of State's office. I did want to let y'all know that as of today, there are 14,853,000 registered voters in Texas. That is a new record. There are 3 weeks left before the October 11th voter registration deadline.
Could you say that number again?
14,853,000.
853,000. Wow.
And so that is a new record. The primary, there were 14,238,000, so we have increased since then.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the difference from last year?
The primary was
Oh, primary.
14,238,000. The last presidential in 2012 was 13,600,000.
Wow.
So we're up 1.2 since 4 years ago.
Wow.
So I don't know if we're going to get quite to 15 million by October the 11th, but our fingers are crossed.
Every registration comes into the Secretary of State's office.
Not exactly.
No, okay.
So the bulk of our registrations come either by mail, the little voter registration applications, and those generally go straight to the counties. About 25,000 or so a month come through our office that we sort.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me I didn't ask the question right.
Sure.
When the county gets a registration, they ultimately send it to the SOS, correct?
Absolutely.
So everything does eventually get to you, whether it's directly or indirectly to the county.
Once a
process.
county has registered a voter, the state registration system assigns that voter a unique identification number, and they are part of the statewide database.
So, wouldn't y'all have a system in there to look to see if you see Jody Lavenberg in Dallas County, Jody Lavenberg in Collin County? Is that something?
Absolutely. And so, as Mr. Maxey alluded to, part of the problem is that there's not enough data for some voters to make a good match, and so it's difficult to determine. Since HAVA, we have a much more uniform base of identifying information, so HAVA requires that a voter give their driver's license number or personal ID number or the last four of their social. And so we generally have that for all the voters registered since HAVA's been in place since 2002. It's the voters before that we might not have the information. Also, the legacy team system, for some reason, it didn't catch duplicates very well. And we think part of that was data entry issues. So whenever I moved into Travis County, I registered to vote. Brian Keith Ingram gave my driver's license number, which hasn't changed, and everything was fine. Then I moved to Williamson County, where I had been registered before, registered again as Brian Keith Ingram, same DL, and so it picked up my previous registration from Williamson County.
Yeah, different
but it didn't
names.
cancel. It didn't cancel my Travis County registration, even though I used exactly the same information.
Okay.
And best we could determine, the reason for that is because there was a space entered before my first name, so it was space Brian instead of Brian Keith Ingram. And the new team system has much better logic built in, and so we catch those duplicates like that for sure. And so it does a much better job of catching duplicate
What
registrations.
happens when you catch a duplicate?
Well, there is a new feature of team that we're going to roll out after this election that enables the county where the voter has the most recent registration to merge the old registration into that record. So that voter will become a registered voter of the new county. The old registration will be canceled, but all the voter history information from the previous county will be rolled into the new registration. So that's something that is a feature that's coming that's not in place yet.
The
So,
numbers may actually go down.
The registration numbers we anticipate
Oh,
will
no.
go down, but that's
so
for
they're
good
doing it after
reason.
the election.
Yeah, right.
So, when you find the duplicates, do you send it to the former county to let them know so they can clean up their rolls, or what
Absolutely.
happens with it?
When duplicates are found, that information, if the county is online, so if they interact with the team system directly and they do all their voter registration, and if both counties are online, then that voter is automatically canceled in the previous county. If not, it'll take a batch process overnight for that old county to get alerted to cancel that
Oh, okay.
voter.
Okay. What about the cross-check program, SB 795? What's going on there?
So there are two basic cross-check programs. There's the Kansas cross-check that's free that y'all have heard about, and then there's the ERIC program that costs money. The Kansas cross-check is what we were investigating performing under SB 795. It requires that our voter registration database be sent to a FTP site that's hosted, I believe, in Arkansas, and then Kansas will match all of the state's records and then distribute out the matches. The Kansas cross-check program requires that you give first name, last name, middle initial, if any, date of birth, and Social Security, at least the last four of the Social. Our concern was that we don't want to take any risk with personal identifying information for the voters of Texas. We take our responsibility for security of the voters' information very seriously. And we investigated the Kansas cross-check process. We looked at all of the open records laws of the participating states, and we did not feel comfortable that we would have sufficient safeguards to protect Texans' information. So we did not actually participate in the cross-check this year. We wanted to make sure that y'all were aware of this issue, and then if you wanted to direct us to do so and submit that information and put it, I don't know if it's at great risk, but at a little bit of risk anyway, then we would certainly do so. But we didn't want to do it without making sure that we were all on the same page about it. So that's the status with cross-check. ERIC, it's the one that is different. So you also have to upload your voter registration database, but in addition, they take the driver's license database and the Bureau of Vital Statistics regarding deceased persons, and they put it all together, so you get much better matching information out of it. And in addition, we don't ever submit any personally identifying information to ERIC. That information is anonymized by a one-way hash on the way out, so it never goes anywhere. Texans voters' personally identifying information would not leave the state of Texas. And so that's all that would get matched is the hashed information.
So maybe the other system, while it's free, they're going to take that information and probably sell it in some other way or something.
It would be at some risk.
And y'all have not made a decision on which one.
Right. So the ERIC program would be preferable, and it also includes national change of address, which would pick up some of the concerns that Mr. Maxey was talking about. Right now, we do not use national change of address because it costs money, but ERIC includes it.
Okay, Rep. Schofield.
There was just a reference made to the selling of the information. Who runs the Kansas program?
So the Kansas program is a cooperative venture between the people who do it. The actual matching is done by Kansas.
The state of Kansas.
The Kansas Secretary of State's office.
So we're not talking about some entity that's likely to go sell our data.
Right.
It's the state.
Oh, okay.
It is the state of Kansas, and then as soon as the matches are done, the data is deleted from that server in Arkansas. So all that's left after the matches are performed is those matches that were sent out to states.
And so let me ask you this: if what I'm trying to do is dedupe my voter rolls, if we have one that uses personally identifying data and one that does not, just uses aggregate data, isn't the personally identifying data much more likely to match up actual voters and dedupe my rolls, which is the purpose in the first place?
I agree. And so that's what ERIC does, use the personally identifying information, but it doesn't actually have it. You see what I mean? It uses all of the data that it's got to make the best possible match, and they are excellent matches. But it doesn't actually have the numbers. It's got an anonymized hash that it matches.
Is there any...
And coincidentally, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The best benefit of ERIC from the member states who've participated in it is catching in-state duplicates. That has been by far the biggest thing that it's done for those states.
Is there any benefit to using both systems and sort of, what do they call it in cooking, reducing down your sauce?
Sure.
Would using the both of them catch more?
It used
or make us sure that we're more accurate in somebody that we're taking off?
Yeah, I would have said yes, but ERIC is now going to include voting history, and that was the piece of the Kansas cross-check that was different than ERIC. It had voting history, so you could actually see if anybody that's registered in more than one place has voted more than once. Now then, ERIC has that information. So going forward, there's not really an advantage to doing both. There's an advantage to doing one or the other.
Okay. Now, it was during the first panel there was discussion about about our sort of, as we are going forward with team trying to catch duplicates as people register from one county to another, and you talked about your own individual story. Do we have any sense of the percentage of people who are duplicate registered that we're finding compared to not? And if you mentioned that you sign on as Brian Keith Ingram, the next time if you go somewhere and just sign on as Keith Ingram, is it not going to catch it?
It should catch it with the same DL number. That's the whole point. The same driver's license should catch Keith Ingram and Brian Keith Ingram, and it will in the new system for sure.
Okay.
I don't have an idea for how many duplicates that we've actually caught since the new system's been online, but I can see if I can find that information.
And you can't tell how many we didn't catch.
Right.
Now,
That's obvious, yes.
we've referred to, and you might have, or might have been Glenn, referred to the sort of post-HAVA and pre-HAVA registrations. What is the effect of a original pre-HAVA registration? So anybody who's over, 30 years old or whatever.
Right.
And then they move now, they're a post-HAVA registration now when they register in their new county, if they move counties, right? If they stay in the original county, they still have their pre-HAVA registration with just a change of address, so we're not, our system won't necessarily catch that. But if they had a pre-HAVA registration, as I do, and then I move counties, which I will not do, they register. It's a post-HAVA registration with all the new data you're required to give. Will it find that old and match it?
Yes, potentially, because there were different periods of time pre-HAVA with different information being collected. There was a period of time where the full 9 of social was being collected. In addition, we had HB 2512 in the 83rd legislative session that allowed us to go out to the DPS database and get as many full 9s of socials as we could for all of the voters in our database. And at that point, what we did is we went from about 6 million in our database that had full 9 to 11 million that had full 9. And our matching has been much improved as a result of that. So HB 2512 went a long way toward assisting us with making sure that we have very good matching in Texas.
So what is our procedure for taking the old registration off the rolls once we know we have a match?
If there's a match, then the new system allows the county to cancel the old voter registration instantly, so if they're online. If they're offline.
If they don't feel like it, they just don't have to? Does it require them to? Does it?
I do not believe that it will move, that the voter will be able to be activated in the new county without canceling the old one, but I can check on that as well. That's my belief, but I'll have to check.
And I'd like to ask one question, just a little off topic, as we head to an election. One thing I hear a lot is people that don't want to register to vote because they're afraid they'll get called for jury duty. If they already have a driver's license, are they any more likely to get called for jury duty if they register to vote?
Theoretically, no. However, whenever we put the two databases together every fall to create the jury wheel, and again, it's the same problems that we have with matching. So we'll have some segment of voters that are voter registration only, some segment of voters that are both TDL and voter registration, and then some that are just DL only.
So the system is to dedupe those so that if you have a driver's license, you should not get on the wheel a second time for registering to vote. And our only concern is, as we get more and more technologically adept, we should get better and better at deduping.
That's right. And I will say that the pot of voters, there's about 18 million on the jury wheel, and the largest number is the one that are in both databases. So it's a small little slice of voter registration only and a little bigger slice of DL only.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to the cross-check, the interstate cross-check. So basically, the Kansas system would be run by their Secretary of State.
That's right.
So that right there would be a level of security as opposed to a...
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then when
So
the
I
matches
take
are
back-
sent out to
I don't think they're going to be selling.
so if somebody is registered in Kansas as well as in Texas, or in Indiana as well as in Texas, if the Indiana or Kansas registration is the most recent, they will get that match, and they will get the
Okay.
information related to that match, what it matched on, so that they will now have that voter's personally identifying information, and that's the only part that will stay in effect after the matching exercise is completed.
What's the cost of the ERIC system?
The ERIC system is a $25,000 initiation fee. It's a one-time fee. There are annual dues. Those are estimated to be for Texas about $83,000. It depends upon how many member states are contributing and the size of the voter rolls. But if nothing changes, right now there are about 20 or 21 ERIC states, and it would be about $83,000 for Texas. The other cost is ERIC requires that Texas invite folks who are eligible to register to vote but who are not currently registered to vote. We have to send them a postcard inviting them to register, and so the initial mail out would be about $1 million. So that's a substantial sum. However, once that has been done, it doesn't have to be done again. And so the ongoing cost would be the membership fees every year plus the cost of eligible but unregistered ongoing, and that would be about $200,000 a year.
Seems like Secretary of State in Kansas, 3 level security, that sounds real good.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, can I ask one question about what he just
Yes,
said?
Schofield.
If you join ERIC, you're required to send out an initial mailer to people who are eligible. How are you? Does the contract say how you're supposed to determine that? Do we have to figure out how to determine that?
ERIC gives us that list.
Oh,
So they will provide us the list, and it'll be absent the duplicates that have been caught by ERIC and everything else. So it's an estimate because it'll be somewhere between 600,000 and 1.4 million based on historical results that ERIC members have experienced when they've joined the program. So that's the best information we've got.
thank you.
Rep. Fallon.
Quick question. I'm just curious, would, when folks that have bulk rate permits, they have a nation change of address they have to subscribe to, I guess it's about $1,000 a year. Would that help us?
It would. It would cost money, but it would definitely help. Yes, sir.
Would it be the same rate? I mean, as just because it's about $1,000 for a business to have it
I think it would be more than that because of
for
the
the
volume
state of Texas. Yeah, sure.
voters. So I don't know how much it would be. I haven't talked to the post office about it, but it would definitely be a useful tool.
That would be interesting. Can we find out how much that?
Sure
That
thing.
would be fascinating. Because that will show you, for instance, in Dallas, Fort Worth, that about 15% of the folks have duplicate addresses or have moved. And it's something you can't have a bulk rate permit per USPS regulations without subscribing to the service. So, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
obviously. Well, just kind of a little side note on this one. Something that really Maxie brought up on trying to encourage people to vote. I know libraries, post offices. Is there any kind of education program where y'all would reach out to apartment associations or?
We don't have that in law now.
Something
It's certainly something that we can do, and it's a very interesting thought to do it.
concept.
And title companies as well.
Title companies, yeah.
So I think that all sounds very interesting.
I mean, we want to make sure every voter is, a legitimate voter, but we also want to encourage everyone who is qualified to vote to get registered.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I asked you who owned and ran the Kansas. I didn't ask you who owns and runs the ERIC.
ERIC is owned by the member states, so that $25,000 initiation fee, and so it's a board of directors that consist of the states who participate in ERIC.
Who runs it?
There is an executive director named John Lindback and one staff member, so there are 2 permanent staff.
So
for
this
ERIC.
is not. I screwed up your phone. So this is not the one that's run by the Pew Charitable Trust?
It was started by Pew, but it has been spun off to the member states 4 years ago. So the member states have been running it since.
And so Pew no longer has a role in it, to your knowledge?
They do not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, members? All right.
I have
Oh, Rep. Fallon.
a little slightly off topic, but I just wanted to refresh my own memory. Not as smart as I want to be or used to be, but if I register to vote now, and let's just say, for instance, I'm a nefarious Russian illegal immigrant, and I want to vote in America, and I fill out my registration card and I check the little box that says American citizen, knowing I'm not, and I send it in, I'm going to get my registration card. And as long as I'm smart enough not to say anything to anybody, I go vote. Now with this voter ID thing being weakened, if I bring my utility bill with me, am I voting? And it counts as long as I don't say anything. Will we ever know?
There's one additional check On that voter registration application, you're supposed to put your driver's license number or the last four of your social. And if you don't put either one of those, then you will get a notice of incomplete. If you return that notice of incomplete and say, this is all the information I've got, then you will be registered to vote. So it will require an additional step for you to get that voter registration to be active. And you've got to return that within 10 days. And so if you don't, then your voter registration will be rejected. So if you don't have a TDL or the last four of the social, or if it doesn't match the information that we get with our live check process, then you will not be registered to vote until you confirm that that's all the information you have, or you don't have either one of those things. Then you will be flagged ID, and you will have to show ID when you vote for the first time. However, under the current process,
when will you be flagged for ID?
you'll be flagged ID whenever you return the voter registration information and say, this is all the information that I've got. You will go ahead and get registered to vote. You will be flagged as an ID required voter under the HAVA law. So that means you will have to show an ID when you show up to vote. Now, Fifth Circuit opinion reasonable impediment, that would have meant you had to show one of the 7 approved forms of ID. Now it means you'll have to show one of the 7 approved forms of ID unless you do not possess one of those and have a reasonable impediment to obtaining one of those.
So
then you'll be able to do a utility bill.
all right, so the Russian comes in and he votes. And when they say, hey, we need an ID, and he says, I don't have one, so he votes.
If he has one of the supporting documents for this election, yes, sir.
Of the 7 that forms, what if he says he does not have those 7?
If he doesn't have one of the 7 forms of, if he does not possess one of the 7 forms of ID and cannot reasonably obtain one of the 7 forms of ID, then he is able to do a reasonable impediment declaration describing what his impediment is to obtaining one of those forms of ID and showing a supporting document such as a utility bill, bank statement, paycheck, government correspondence.
He just says he doesn't have the money. He writes it in the statement. I don't have the money. Here's my utility bill. Does his vote count?
It will.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Keith. Okay. Next panel will be J. Christian Adams, President and General Counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, and Donald Palmer with the Bipartisan Policy Center. If y'all would like to join us, thank you for coming. And please introduce yourself again, if you don't mind.
I'm J. Christian Adams. I'm President and General Counsel of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, which is a nonprofit charity devoted to election integrity.
Don Palmer with the Bipartisan Policy Center. I'm a fellow at the Democracy Project.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, and Jay, Christian, you want to begin?
Sure. Madam Chairwoman, Vice Chair Goldman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in this very important matter. Excuse me. My organization promotes election integrity and defends the constitutional decentralization of power so that states may administer their own elections. I brought cases in federal court against 3 separate Texas counties who we believe failed to conduct adequate list maintenance in keeping voter rolls updated and accurate, and I will discuss these matters below. Inaccurate voter rolls containing registrants who have died, moved, or committed disqualifying felonies is a serious problem throughout the United States. A study by the Pew Center on the States found that millions of voter registrations in America are invalid, out of date, or duplicates. In Texas alone, multiple counties have recently had more registrants than age-eligible citizens who even live in the county. Over the last several years, the Public Interest Legal Foundation and other organizations dedicated to election integrity have sent notice letters to multiple Texas counties with more registrants than people alive. These notice letters inform the local election official that a problem exists, invite a remedy, and give the statutory notice that a lawsuit may commence if the voter rolls are not cleaned. For example, in 2015, Public Interest Legal sent notice letters to 9 counties in Texas with more registrants than age-eligible population. These counties were, for example, Brooks, and forgive my pronunciation, I live in Virginia, so I'll mess some of these up, Kennedy, McMullen, Irion, Jim Hogg, Culberson, Duval, and Presidio, with percentages ranging from 123% in Brooks to 102% in Presidio. Polk, which is also 101%. When CVAP is used, which is citizen voting age population, which is actually the better number, because non-citizens can't vote. Starr County revealed a CVAP ratio of 108%. There may be multiple explanations for why the voter rolls in some counties may be bloated, while in other counties they are not. My experience litigating these cases is the chief reason the rolls become filled with inaccurate and obsolete registrations is that many election officials have multiple responsibilities which deflect their attention, such as serving as local sheriff or tax assessor collector. Voter roll list maintenance has become a low priority in many of these places. This neglect was so acute in one county that we litigated against that they actually had a dead person on the voter rolls who died in 1944. This is in Zavala County, Texas, that we discovered in this litigation. Other election officials revealed in depositions that they didn't even know what the National Voter Registration Act was, which is the federal list maintenance obligation statute. Without question, dirty voter rolls are the perfect environment for voter fraud. When dead voters are not removed, illegal voting and pervasive absentee ballot fraud can follow. While voter ID laws are helpful in this regard, they do not solve the problem. Clean rolls do. Now, if you look at each of these counties that we sued, Terrell County being one, what we found there was that list maintenance was a wholly informal matter conducted by the sheriff. The extent of the list maintenance was often, shall we say, extremely unusual. In Zavala County, the county where we had a voter who died in 1944, there were multiple problems, which are probably present in other Texas counties. We had staff who did not know how to use the team system. They admitted to us in deposition they had no clue how it worked. These are the people responsible for list maintenance. We had staff who didn't know what the applicable laws were. We had dead people on the rolls, as I said, one who died in 1944. It was not a combat death. It was a non-combat death, but nonetheless, that's a pretty astounding statistic. We found that election officials did not even have an elementary understanding of list maintenance mechanics in these depositions. They were not competent using the statewide database by their own admission, and no efforts were ever made to conduct effective countywide list mailings which might have revealed information leading to these obsolete and invalid registrations. No effort whatsoever was made to access jury recusal form data in these counties. None, as if they didn't even hear about the possibility. In fact, they resisted the idea. We also have litigation against Starr County, Texas right now under the National Voter Registration Act, and so far the defendants have resisted all efforts to reach a solution to the problems in Starr, where 110% of age-eligible citizens have been on the rolls. I have 6 recommendations in my written testimony, which I think 6, there might be 7, which I will briefly mention here. First of all,
I'm sorry, did you submit the written testimony?
I did.
We've got it. Okay.
I did. The first one is to fully collect and use jury excusal data. Do not only use jury excusal data for citizenship issues, but it is a wealth of information about who was moved, who is no longer at the addresses where the jury notices are being sent to. In Zavala County, they were not only not using this, they'd never even heard of the idea of using it. And I suspect the same is probably true elsewhere. Number 2, participate fully in the interstate cross-check program. Your next witness, I will tell you, if he will not, that he is one of the leading, most forward-thinking state election officials in this country. Mr. Palmer has been a state election official in Virginia and the state of Florida, 2 of the biggest states in the nation, and implemented cutting-edge technologies, one of which was the interstate cross-check program in Virginia. I actually helped defend that program in federal court, in the United States District Court in the Eastern District of Virginia, and I will tell you it works. Fears about the reliability and loss of personal data are overblown. It is free, it is easy, it is quick, it is effective. There is no reason not to use it fully. If you want to use ERIC, go ahead, but I'll talk about ERIC in a minute. There is no reason not to use the interstate cross-check program to its fullest extent. If you have to pass a statute to deal with the personal information, do it on the first day of the session, because it is an extremely effective program. ERIC, I'm an advocate of using all tools that are available. I would urge you, however, to investigate the origins of ERIC. For example, you heard in Mr. Ingram's testimony, you have to do a mailing to unregistered voters. Find out where that data is coming from. Find out the origins of the database interactions between private entities and ERIC. I'm not saying don't use ERIC. I think you should use all available tools, but go in with eyes wide open about ERIC. Number 3, this is very important. Request and obtain the SAVE database from the federal government for citizenship checks. We are finding across the country an extraordinary problem of aliens on the voter rolls, and virtually nothing is being done about it. States have the right, and it's in my written testimony, to access the SAVE database. Governor Perry in 2012 mentioned that Texas was going to seek this data, which allows you to check your voter rolls against aliens on the federal database, whether they're applying for visas, whether they're seeking green cards, whether they've been picked up at the border. You can match the data. Now, other states have had problem getting usable data from the federal government. Persist. Seek it out. Demand it. You have a right to it. There's no reason you shouldn't use it, because under 8 U.S.C. 1373, which is in my written testimony, the federal government must give you the data. All it takes is the persistence to seek it out. Number 4, compare homestead data with voter registration records. The Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts should provide data to local and state election officials to cross-reference residency applications with voter registration information. A homestead, as you know, is a fairly conclusive statement about where somebody lives. There's no reason not to use it. Number 5, conduct regular statistical reviews. When we first looked at the registration rates, and we found that some counties in Texas, by the way, there used to be a lot more 5 years ago. Some counties were over 100%, and we contacted those counties. Those counties didn't even know they were over 100%. So nobody was taking the temperature of the registration rolls. And so that's something that should be done. 6, training. I talked about Zavala County. The Teams system presented enormous problems. I understand it's being updated, which is good, because the folks in Zavala did not know how to use it and did not know how to use it effectively. Lastly, enhanced use of mailings. Mr. Palmer, I believe, will talk more about this. Listen carefully. The states and the local officials could do a lot more with mailings. I know the post office isn't perfect, but it's the best we've got. And send letters and notices and voter information, as Dawn did in Virginia, to voters, so you constantly pinging them with active sonar, if you will, to find out where they are, when they've moved. And you collect that data to help you do your list maintenance better. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Representative Schofield.
You mentioned the two cross-check systems or organizations, and you heard me ask the Secretary of State if there was a benefit to using both, and didn't get an answer that made it sound like there was a whole lot of increased efficacy by having two.
Yeah.
If one is free and the other costs a lot of money, might we be better off going with the one that's free and potentially more secure?
Well, they also cover different states. Remember, ERIC is a largely, well, my understanding of ERIC, and I'm sure some will quibble, but it's a largely northeastern state origin program. Now, it's since expanded, but it was interesting to watch the two programs develop, because it was almost like there were two camps. There was sort of the southern Kansas Midwestern, and there was the northeastern. And one had its origins, as I said, in places I'm not terribly comfortable with. And where are they getting the non-registered data? I think it's coming from private databases, which may have one foot in the political world. And I don't know exactly where those non-registered databases are coming from. Are they the Catalyst database? I'm not sure. Perhaps others can testify as to where they're coming from.
Well, it sounds like that one system, the ERIC system, you have to be a member to participate. And if you don't have how many states are a member? If you're not a member, then it's sort of moved. Right?
It's similar, though, to Kansas, where it's the members are exchanging their data. It's a members club in both of them. And look, I'm a fan of using all tools that are available.
Okay.
If you have the money laying around to use ERIC, I would suggest you use it, but use it going in knowing what it involves. Kansas is a very fleeting thing. You merge the data for a flash, They do the list, and then it destroys the data. Okay, they just create the dupe list, and then the ultimate underlying database is destroyed almost immediately once the dupe list is created. It's designed so there's not a fixed, long-standing public record. You see, nobody's selling the cross-state data anywhere. It's destroyed immediately.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Fallon.
so in your opinion, where's the threat or the risk in using the Kansas system?
I don't think there is any. I told a
don't
federal
see
judge this in the United States District Court in pleadings, that the Kansas state system is both effective, free, as long as exceptions are made to they protect the personal information. The Arkansas servers do not let out the personal information, in my experience. The question is, what does Texas law say about giving them that personal information? That might be where the fix needs to be.
Thank you.
So you probably have more members than in the Kansas system because it's free?
Well, Dawn may know this. I don't know what the scoreboard is right now.
Oh, okay.
It varies from year to year, and I haven't checked the latest scoreboard.
Okay. Any other questions, members? All right, thank you. All right.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Palmer, yes.
thank you for inviting me to testify on these issues. I work at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and we're working with the former commissioners of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration to advance nonpartisan reforms, including these data sharing programs that we've been discussing, including IVRC, which is the cross-check program, and the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is the ERIC program. As a chief election official in Virginia, one of the major issues that I identified very early in the process that there was a deep lack of accuracy of the voter rolls, and it concerned me. And we used what tools we had, including technology and the new tools that are available to reduce sort of the high cost of that and to try to mitigate the problem. Enhancing voter list maintenance with new technologies and cooperation between states addressed a lot of the issues that the commission, the President's Commission, identified of why there were delays at the polling places in 2012. And a lot of that was because there were errors in the voter registration rolls. You can imagine that if everything's perfect on the voter registration rolls, people are going to be processed very quickly. But if there's errors, if there's problems, if there's provisional ballots, there's all types of issues, it delays that process. So that was a major finding of the commission, is that our the messy state of our voter registration rolls was a major cause of lines in 2012. And so obviously this is a goal that we're trying to discuss. So I would tell you that it's vitally important that Texas participate in these programs, particularly because of your status, very large state, your population's a destination state for many Americans. And as a Virginian, I desperately wanted Texas to participate. And it would help keep our voter rolls complete. Because you can imagine if you have 30 states, but you're leaving out California, New York, and Texas, there's a lot of room for improvement. And that was one reason why we desperately wanted Texas to participate. And I think Texas would gain a lot from this program, because now that the programs are operating, and things can always be improved, but they're operating, the fact that Texas would be involved, a lot of this information would be available for you to then act upon with your local election officials, and they can act upon it. Let me give you a little statistics. In January, each January, IVRC participating states share their lists and receive back a list of the potential duplicate registrations and the voter history. In 2015, 28 states shared, in IVRC, the cross-check program, shared approximately 110 million records. That's a lot. And that resulted in approximately 10 million duplicate matches. And that's sort of the extent of the problem. And there are differing levels of people being registered in 2 states, 3 states, 5 states. Obviously, the numbers are low for the 5 states, but it shows you the depth of the problems. And that was just what we saw in Virginia. Now, in 2016, there were 30 participating states, with several more joining after legislation was passed, similar to Texas, to allow them to participate in the IVRC program. So, shifting to ERIC, as of September of 16, we in Virginia were a founding member of ERIC. I participated in both and implemented both, and we can talk about some of my recommendations in a minute. But since ERIC has been instituted with those states, and it started out with 7, 10, 15, 20, it's been increasing, it has identified just under 1 million out-of-state movers. These are people that have moved from one of the member states to another member state. So it shows you the mobility of Americans and the fact that elected officials don't really have a handle on how to track or identify where they're moving to. Since its inception, ERIC has also identified 3.7 million in-state movers. And this goes into the issue of duplicate registrations within those states. And despite our efforts of the member states, we all have sort of measures to identify duplicates in the in-state mobility. ERIC identified 3.7 million additional in-state movers. That's amazing. And that's one reason I testify to these things. And it also, because of the software, identified an additional 162,000 deceased voters. So you know that Texas and all states across the union have other procedures to identify, they have common procedures to identify deceased voters. ERIC identified an additional 162,000 across the board. The Bipartisan Policy Center has endorsed both of these reforms. The Republican National Lawyers Association has endorsed both of these programs. And as an election official, we in Virginia and Florida, or in Virginia, we did both of these. Now, some of my recommendations outside of joining and full participation in those programs is in my testimony, and I'll go through them briefly. Number one, because of there is no silver bullet, we used a variety. We participated in both programs and other data we would use. We created a data center to supplement our voter registration system. It would be designed to process the multiplicity of registration data input. There is no silver bullet available for the problem of outdated rolls, but in order to mitigate the problem, we employed a number of different data streams that could help be compared against our voter registration list. This was in parallel to our normal daily registration and maintenance systems. So as we improved our processing this data, and it was a learning experience, we added these business rules to our list. Number two, I would amend laws to allow the sharing of registration data between the states to improve the matching criteria and get the job done. The more matching criteria that you're able to provide to ERIC or IVRC, the better matches you'll have, and more matches, and the better criteria you have for doing that. So if you're able to provide Social Security and DMV data, this allows more accurate matching. I can tell you that this sort of information will help reduce any false positives and increase the number that can be acted upon. In my experience, both at the Department of Justice and with in election administration, a lot of this is within the confines of the National Voter Registration Act. And so I would say that funding separate annual statewide mailings to all registered voters is one of the major tools in your toolbox. And it's just something that can be done to supplement what the local election officials are doing. I would also recommend increasing the frequency of national change of address list comparisons and mailings. About 70% of voters affirmatively notify postal officials when they move and provide a new address. That leaves a whole swath of folks. Even if all that was accurate and up to date, there's a whole swath of individuals who do not. And that is an issue. And so one of the issues we find is when you only do an NCOA mailing once a year, is that becomes outdated and stale, and therefore it loses its effectiveness. You don't reach the voter, and the voter is less likely to confirm that they've changed address. And so what we found is quarterly or twice a year mailings with NCOA comparisons is best practice. There is an answer to the postal. There is a potential answer to the issue with the Postal Service. First of all, only 70% use NCOA, and it's not always effective with the Postal Service. But there is a way to identify when an individual has moved to another residence, either outside or inside the state, and that's usually concerning a public-private partnership with commercial vendors. And what we were able to find is we were able to get the best and new address for the voter, and that would trigger a mailing. Otherwise, election officials have no really idea when the voter has moved, as you said, and we're just wasting money sending mailings and voter cards and creating duplicates because we don't have the correct address. Accordingly, states should consider utilizing data from private commercial vendors to supplement NCOA, because that provides credible, highly accurate data to identify inaccurate and outdated addresses. And now there's been experiences in Orange County, California. They did a whole report on it that utilized commercial data from Experian to update voter addresses, and that's yielded promising results and cost savings because they were able to limit their mailings to the most accurate address. Next recommendation is to educate voters on the importance of informing election officials of a move on their voter registration. There's been discussion on that. I won't go into that again. But it is really a problem because very few people do that, and therefore all the hard work has to be done to do the list maintenance. I've tried to use catchphrases as "be kind to your election official, update your registration," because it truly is an issue. One of the things that a lot of states have done is create an online portal for the self-removal of registration by voters who have moved out of state. This is they're able to come onto a site, provide identifying information. Usually it's triggered by a mailing that we've sent that says, it indicates that you've moved to Nebraska, for example. You're able to go online back to Texas, provide some identifying information, and you can self-remove yourself from the voter rolls. This, huge savings and huge efficiencies. Number 8, uniform electronic notification by local election officials of new registrations to previous address. This was alluded to by other folks. This used to be very common and one of the best ways to have nationwide list maintenance, but it's become irregular and non-uniform across the country, not just in Texas. And sort of a new focus on that from an electronic point of view might help this process. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this matter. Hope there are any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, members?
Just one quick one.
Rep. Schofield.
I have a quick question. You mentioned with respect to the public-private partnerships with list vendors, and you said something about, or at least seemed to say something about it improving the accuracy. I assumed that meant because the list vendors who are commercial have a commercial interest in making sure their list is good. Is that what you meant, or did you mean something else?
Well, yes. I mean, it's highly accurate because the whole Eric's accuracy and accuracy of vendors that have an interest in making sure the best address, they're using a whole bunch of sources to identify what the best address is to a percentile, usually like 99.9%. Don Palmer's address is 123 Main Street. They have a much more, because they have an interest to make sure it's correct to their customers. And so NCOA is just one input to this mix, this soup. So when you go, for example, if you were to have NCOA, you run your voter registration list against NCOA, it's going to give you all those individuals that have self-identified that they've moved. But there's a whole, like I said, there's 30% of that that's not. What you're able to do is run the list of that 30% and find out what their new address is. And the vendor will tell you. So it's a vendor election official relationship. I give them my voter registration list, I tell them what I want, and they're able to provide me with the best addresses. And so what they do is they'll run a list of 100,000 people. If 10,000 of them have an address that's in a different county or a different state, they tell me is ding, 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 there's an indication that it triggers a mailing that helps you identify and send a mailer to the individual and say, hey, what's your status? We have an indication that you've moved. You have an option here. You can move yourself from the rolls. Otherwise, let us know what you want. You want to keep your registration. We used it as a method of identifying those that didn't use the national change of address.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank y'all for coming. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. I have a quick question for Keith again, since we're on this. Good testimony. Thank you.
Very good.
Hey, Keith.
Madam Chair.
Okay, so back to the Interstate Voter Registration Cross-Check Program. Tell me again what you're waiting for.
So the City of Dallas versus Paxton case made the date of birth confidential information. Of course, Social Security is already confidential information, and we did not want to share confidential information with other states without explicit permission to do so.
So do we need to do something legislatively?
I believe so. I think the piece of the code, I don't remember.
Okay, so the bill, as it's written now, is limited, so you really can't implement a cross-check program.
Yes, it added 18062 to the election code, and if we added a C there or added 2A, just to make clear that everybody knows that personally identifying information is going to be shared.
Yeah, Rep. Fallon.
Can you just specifically give me that again, because I'd like to draft legislation.
Sure. 18062 of the election code.
180.
Yeah, we need to know specifically where it is. So we can't do anything with the cross-check.
I don't believe so right now. Legally, we are constrained.
18062?
Yes,
Is there
sir.
any subchapters? Or?
No, it's 18062, and I believe you can add some language to A to make it clear, and then I think everything would be fine.
Okay.
What,
We have
I'm-
AG's office here.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What specific data should we include in it? Just confidential data should we list? Driver's license, social?
The
just
driver's
say-
license will not need to be shared. It's
Sure.
only the date of birth and last four of the social.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we have the AG's office if anybody has any questions for them. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, guys? Okay. All right, that will conclude charge number 2. Y'all have anything else to add to it? All right, so now we're going to move on to charge number 4. We did it in the order that we thought the time would be best used. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, charge number 4, examine mail ballot fraud in Texas. Review the recent legislative efforts to address mail ballot fraud in Texas as well as in other states and make appropriate legislative recommendations. So our first panel, we have, I'll just tell y'all for time's sake, we have 4 panels, and first panel is Bill Fairbrother and Legislative Chair of the Texas Republican County Chairmen's Association, and Glenn Maxey, Texas Democrat Party. If y'all would like to come, go ahead. And this time we will start with Mr. Maxey.
For the record, again, I'm Glenn Maxey with the Texas Democratic Party. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about mail ballots. The charge is very narrow about mail ballot fraud. I'm going to try to keep it on that, but I think I have to move a little bit outside of just mail ballots in general to talk about why I think there are problems or problems have existed. Over the last number of sessions, or last decade or so, the legislature has taken numerous steps to deal with the instances of people unduly influencing a person voting a mail ballot or applying for a mail ballot. I believe that those laws are working well. Current law now is very strict that only a member of the family or somebody who resides in the household can witness an application. A person can only witness one application if you're unrelated in a whole calendar year. There are strict prohibitions of non-related persons assisting voters mark ballots now. Prohibitions of paying people to harvest or get a ballot from a voter to take it to the post office. No longer can someone pay people by the ballot, which was a huge incentive of people harvesting ballots. And so I think that those laws are in place and have had the desired effect that the legislature put them in place. Watching this across the state, I don't see that the huge abuses of 20 years ago where somebody actually follows the postal truck, gets the ballot out of the mailbox, walks in the house, and marked it for somebody. I think those abuses are long gone. I think the number of cases prosecuted by the Attorney General and local DAs sort of is the piece that proves that the laws are in place, penalties are there, prosecutions have occurred. I would have to say that I believe that in some cases we've constricted this so much that we have caught a lot of good Samaritans or good neighbors in a web of being a criminal when they simply were trying to help their neighbor. And so, and inadvertently somebody, got prosecuted or got called on the carpet about doing that when they didn't know that they were doing anything at all untoward or illegal. They simply thought that they were helping an elderly person, in a civic duty. It's also, I think, constricted the people who work with the social workers or administrators of nursing homes and assisted living places who historically have made sure that voter registration cards are available and help people get registered to vote. And then because those people are in a non-mobile state to go to a polling place, mail ballot applications, assisting them to do those. And then when the ballots come, the people saying, can you help me with this? And then it's really constricted that a person or a couple staffers, if there's 100 people in the facility, can get in real trouble just by assisting people at their request because of their eyesight or ability to write and things like that. So I think there's a balance, and we may be at that point right now on mail ballot stuff. I want to talk a little bit about a few issues that I hope the legislature will address that are not typically fraud, but where people and our election officials complicitly are assisting people to bend the law because the law doesn't fit the voter. And I'll just run through a couple of those. Every cycle when seniors or people who have certain occupations attempt to vote, we find that the schedule, the calendar, work schedules totally just do not work for them. Those, the three major groups that I see are, I don't have a lot of sympathy for these people, but the people who are going on cruises, always the question. I'm going to be on a cruise. I'm going to be gone for the whole period of early vote and election day. The law says that I'm going to be out of the county. I can get a mail ballot, but the ballot has to be sent to someplace out of the county. I'm not going to someplace where I can get mail out of the county, so it doesn't fit. So what can I do? And so, you work around it. On all these, we work around, and the others are long-distance truckers. They are moving. The county can't find an address to mail them to, but if the ballot actually came to their house, their family members could get the ballot mailed, forwarded to where they're going to be when they have a layover. And the last is the people who are our oil field workers and offshore workers. Mm-hmm. The ballots, typically you're on a rig for 30 days or so. Mail's helicoptered or taken out by boat, but you can't mail to the oil rig. You can't mail to where the trucker is. What typically the workarounds on all of these kinds of things is telling people, well, just fudge it. Have your ballot sent to your sister just right over the county line, then drive over to your sister's house, get your ballot, and mail it in before you go on your cruise, before you go out on your truck drive, or before you go to the oil field rig. I don't quite know now why in law that we say that somebody who's going to be out of the county for that period of time and is testifying to that on their application has to have their ballot mailed out of the county. Why can't they have it mailed to their home so that they can just mail it at their convenience? The issue is they're not here when balloting is going on. The fact that the ballot has to go out of the county is to the point of ridiculousness. I would be remiss in talking here about bending that law again, and it falls back into the over-registration in certain counties. The gentleman mentioned Polk County, Texas, so I looked up on the voter rolls yesterday the situation in Polk County. There's just a little over 38,000 registered voters there. There are 9,423 of those people registered at an RV park where there are only 138 spaces. Very few of those spaces are taken up by permanent residents. If you look at our just change of address that the Democratic Party does on our voter file, over 1,000 of those people have out-of-state addresses as their mailing address. None of those people live in Texas right now, but they all vote in Texas. The system is that they register to vote and they register their RV in Polk County so that they become Texas citizens, so they're not paying state income taxes in New York or Wisconsin or wherever they were originally from. These are the people who are permanently living in RVs. They register to vote in Polk County to prove that they're Texas citizens. They then vote by mail through a mail house that is in Polk County. but the ballots are mailed to a temporary shed right across the county line and one county over. Somebody goes, picks up all 9,000 of those ballots, or however many there are, of the 9,423 people, brings them back into Polk County, mails them out to wherever those people are, and then the ballots come back and are cast in Polk County. All of that's legal, but I don't think it's the way that we should be doing this. That's probably why Polk County has more than 100% of their voting age people registered, because there's 9,423 people who weren't there for the census, but they certainly are there to vote by mail. So we should take care of some of those kinds of issues of these workers. The other sort of difficulty I see is caretakers of people with permanent disabilities. We always have those people who call and say, I have my mother's on a respirator, or I have a child on a respirator. I am their 24/7 caretaker, can't leave during the voting time. My child, if they're over 18, can vote because they have a disability, but I can't vote by mail because I'm the caretaker. I talked to a number of county election officials who always tell people, those people just check disabled and go with it, and we'll just fudge it. Now, they're not, clearly that's not legal, but it's the only way those people can cast a ballot. So we should make an exception for those people who are in those situations where they cannot leave whoever they're the caretaker for, to allow them to vote by mail. And lastly, just another issue that's come up that I'm concerned about just in the processing of mail ballots, that I don't know that it's a problem yet. I just learned of a county in South Texas who has contracted with a for-profit company in Dallas. My understanding is that daily they will be sending the list of people who've asked for a mail ballot to a for-profit company in Dallas, where they'll prepare the ballots and mail out the ballots back to the people in South Texas. We all believe that all mail ballot handling, we know that ballots are printed by companies, come under the auspices of the election worker who has an oath to protect those ballots.
Say it again. Now, what is happening?
It's, instead of the elections worker in the county putting the ballot packet together, matching it to the list, keeping the list, and mailing it out, ballot coming back, they contracted with a company in Dallas where they're going to email the addresses to the people in Dallas. They're going to put the ballots together and then mail them back out to the voters. Now, this probably is saving the county money to do this, but there is no election official supervising live ballots. And I've talked to the Secretary of State. They're not sure that it's quite legal, but they're going to research it. But I just see that if we do believe, I don't think the election code perhaps doesn't prohibit this. If we do allow that to happen, I can see very quickly a lot of counties contracting out and having people who are not under oath, the election officials processing ballots, and I think there could be some major problems in the future. So if that is the case, that the election code allows it, I think we should address that this next legislative session. And lastly, just in the area of mail ballots, I'm going to make this point. I was the administrator for 42 primaries under Senate Bill 1448, where the state party running primaries where there are not county Democratic chairs. This last election, the ineptitude of county election officials, that's a bad word. I don't want to cast aspersions, but the lack of training or the lack of how to run an election by people who in small counties is eye-opening, to say the least. 42 primaries. It was done in 42 different ways, some of which did not comply with the election code, as far as I could tell. And so I will be back during the session talking to you all about how to fix some of that. And one of the things, just because it has to do with mail ballots, that I wanted to speak to, while I have your attention, is that in these 42 counties, they're very small. Each one of them cost, for the runoff election, where there was just a railroad commission election, cost between $2,500 and $5,000. In some cases where there were 0 voters or 2 voters, it's a lot of money for 2 people to cast a ballot. So I think that we should address allowing in very small counties where there are only statewide elections, allowing or requiring that all the runoff be done by mail ballot. Letting the people, everybody who voted in the first election, which typically were 10 or 15, that in the runoff, those people get a mail ballot. It would cost us about $50 to do instead of $5,000. And having those small counties do mail ballot elections would save the state a lot of money and probably be much more efficient than what occurred. With that, I'll close.
Representative Schofield, do you have further?
I have a couple. First, I'll just briefly on the last one. I, for one, am uncomfortable with doing elections by mail, but the point that you made of mailing ballots to just the people that voted in the primary, remember, if you didn't vote in the primary, you're still eligible to vote in the runoff.
I think the piece of that would be that any additional person who wants to vote could request a mail ballot. We would make that as a reason that they could get a ballot.
That is a harder hurdle to climb than going to a polling place that's always, that's open every primary season and all that. I don't want the Justice Department getting on us or else making it tougher for those folks to get a ballot. The first thing you mentioned was the requirement that we mail a ballot out of the county to somebody who says they're going to be out of the county. While I am definitely sympathetic with some of the things that need to be tightened up, again, I think there's a very good reason why we require that. Particularly in this era where people are trying to get around voter ID, to allow anybody to get a ballot mailed to their house with no proof that they're really going to be out of the state, and just voting it would allow a lot of people who may not be who they are to get a bunch of ballots sent to a certain place and vote them. Sending it to where they say they're going to be indicates that we're sending it to them. Now, I do think that there's room for example, for offshore voters, the place where you're going to be may be the office nearest the rig of your company, and they can bring them out to the rig or things of that nature.
I think that we can work around that. I mean, the issue for me, even if there was an extra step for these kind of people who are caught, if it's the caretaker of a person with disability, you put in, you file it with something from a doctor. If it's the offshore oil rig or the trucker, that they do something from their employer. I mean, just something to keep people who are now prohibited from getting access to a ballot to get one.
I agree, and I think we need to make sure we have a balance between making sure that people who legitimately are, for example, a caretaker of someone who needs round-the-clock help, and opening a loophole that can be used by people that don't want to have to show their ID, which I think is a different thing. And I did have one other question, the processing the mail ballots. This South Texas County you referred to, is that the only one you're aware of?
It's the first time I or the Secretary of State's heard of somebody outside the county actually processing live ballots.
I'd never heard of it. So as far as you know, to this day, there's one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Fowle.
Thanks, Chair. Glenn, just real quick, of these small counties, do you have any idea how many, or we're talking, let's say, are voting less than 10 people, or a dozen?
I did 42, and of those 42, probably the most ballots that were counted out of these 42 counties were something like 50. So most of them were the 10 or 15. But when you have to program ballots for 4 separate precincts, even though you only have one voting location, we have real problems. I mean, let me just say, real problems with the companies that print ballots. It's highway robbery, what they do. We have 2 major vendors, and the way they do this, you have to buy a minimum of 1,000 ballots, even if you know that you're going to have 10 voters. There's just a lot of that. It is extremely expensive.
2 quick questions with respect to that. Is there any way to
No, go ahead, Mike.
to aggregate those so that the pooling power of, say, all 42 of those counties can be used for one contract? Is that legal under the current law?
No, but we should. And the second piece of that is we have only 2 billing companies. to ballot companies. Just the whole process of how we pay for these ballots. Money comes from the Secretary of State out to 508 county chairs, Democrats and Republicans, in the thousands of dollars that are put in a private bank account that only has the county chair's name on it. County chair then moves, dies, whatever. You can't get access to the money. They don't pay the ballots on time. I hope to come to y'all with some suggestions about that all of the ballot bills go directly to the Secretary of State and they pay them directly. The fact that we throw millions of dollars out to 500 volunteers who may or may not lose it, misspend it, whatever, there's lots of problems I have seen. I've looked at almost every county Democratic primary filing so far, what they filed for. The cost of elections is radically different county by county, how we do things. There's no standardization. There is much money to be saved and lots of efficiency to be done in how we fund primary elections.
Any other questions, members? No? You up?
Good morning, Bill Fairbrother once again. Many of the items in Charge 2 apply directly to reducing and eliminating the chances of mail ballot fraud. Making sure those who are deceased, move, or otherwise are ineligible to vote are removed from the rolls is a key step in ensuring the integrity of elections. Additionally, there are several other things we think should be considered. In general, stronger penalties for election fraud. In many cases, it's a Class C or Class B misdemeanor. Quite frankly, that's just not enough of an incentive for folks that may be hyper interested in an election and tempted to skirt the law or cheat. We think many of the penalties should be increased. There's one that we discovered, Caldwell County Republican Party chair discovered someone who'd voted twice in the primary this year. They passed the information on to the district attorney locally, and they consulted with the Secretary of State and discovered that voting twice in a primary is only a Class C misdemeanor, whereas voting twice in a general election is a second-degree felony. We will definitely be coming back on that particular glaring disparity and asking for a much stronger penalty. As was alluded earlier, voter ID for mail balloting is lax and needs to be strengthened. There's always the financial cost versus increased security, but one idea we've been researching is the idea of generating a unique code on your voter registration card that's not public. So when you apply for a ballot by mail, you put this unique code. That way there's not someone nefariously generating massive ballot by mail requests for people they know don't exist or don't vote that can be verified. And that would help ensure that the person applying to vote by mail is the actual voter. Another thought is if email address were part of the voter registration application, the voter registrar early voting clerk could easily send someone a confirmation that we received your application to vote by mail. If someone put in an application for someone nefariously or without their knowledge, that'd be a very affordable way for that voter to find out and then call in or question, hey, I did not request that ballot by mail. While not exactly fraud, we've received many complaints about incorrectly designed or poorly worded mail ballot applications being sent out by candidates, parties, and other groups. Perhaps stricter requirements for such mailings and or the ability for the Secretary of State, Election Administration, or other election officials to review or approve such forms should be considered. One innovative process for processing absentee voting for those in nursing homes and other residential care facilities comes from Wisconsin, where they swear in special voting deputies, one Republican and one Democrat per team, and they visit the facilities and conduct voting on behalf of those who have applied for an early ballot. If possible, they can come to a central area and vote there. Otherwise, they will actually go room to room for people that, for whatever reason, can't go to vote. While the cost of that process concerns me, that takes away any thought of undue influence or the restriction on the number of nursing home people, how many people they can assist. That brings deputized sworn people from both parties to the facilities And we've been researching that Wisconsin program a bit more, but we do think that has some interesting ideas there for us to consider. One problem where a solution currently escapes us has to do with the relatively new annual ballot by mail request. There's some confusion on when this information can as well as should become public. The code reads that applications are subject to review the day after the election for which the application was sent in for. Some have interpreted this to mean that annual applications are not available until the end of the calendar year because they apply to all elections held that year. So in a March or May election, people can't see the applications until months past the window to contest an election. This is already shown to be a problem in several counties. However, making the information public after the first election risks subjecting that voter to harassment or people pressuring them for their votes for all subsequent elections that year. So we wish we had a solution for that, but we're still researching that. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me here today and look forward to working with you all on election legislation in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbrother. Representative Fallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm intrigued by your idea about the unique code on the voter registration card. Could you just expound on that a little bit?
Well, the thought is, on the driver's license, you have your driver's license number, and then you have another unique number there.
On your driver's
not,
license?
Yeah, for
Okay.
example. That's not public, not subject to open records request. If we had such a control number, or even something maybe that couldn't be unique, but like the CVV code on the back of your credit card that gives some extra security, if there's that number that's on your registration card that has to accompany your application for ballot by mail, and when you return the ballot by mail, they can at least match you back to someone who has a unique number that only the voter should have. You don't have a vote harvester or someone like that mass producing ballot by mail applications and somehow fraudulently submitting applications when you have this number to help verify that the actual person that initiated and is getting the ballots is the actual voter.
But Bill, you're talking about using that unique code on the voter registration card itself, yes? Or on the driver's
It should
license?
appear on the registration card.
Okay, yeah.
I was just drawing in the parallel to
Right,
it.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, I understand.
And if that's not a public piece of information, that person, when they fill out the application for ballot by mail,
Just go get their card.
registration card and put that number down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm going to call Keith with the Secretary of State's office to come on back. I have follow-up questions after these guys find testimony.
Keith Ingram, Texas Secretary of State Elections Division.
Thank you. Mr. Ingram, can you follow up on Mr. Maxey's testimony about the money sent to the county chairs and why that is, and would it be better for y'all to control that and control the whole system?
So I was asked in my first year in this job, what's the most surprising thing that I'd experienced since I'd been here? And I said the way that we finance primaries is completely, I couldn't believe the way that we do it. And Mr. Maxey...
Not to interrupt, what does that go back to? I mean, where did this all begin? Have you researched that? You don't know?
I do not know. But it's so it used to be that the filing fees were much higher. There was a litigation that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that you couldn't price people out of the political market by, overcharging for filing fees, and you had to provide an opportunity for somebody to apply for the ballot by petition. So that resulted in much less money available to the parties. So the parties used to collect filing fees, and they would finance the primary election with those filing fees, and the state had very little involvement. But after that court case, the filing fees had to be reduced substantially. The primary election still cost the same amount of money. So now then we supplement all of the money is considered to be state money, the filing fees as well as the GR that's used. And for every primary election, there's about $3 million in filing fees and about $12 million in state general revenue that is used to finance that election. And it is still considered to be the party's election. And so the party chairs in each county put on that election, and they have to make a contract with the county election official unless the county election official won't make a contract with them, and then they have to run the election themselves. But it's considered to be their election, and that's why the money is channeled that way. It goes to the party chairs. We pay 75% of the estimated cost to the party chair, less whatever they've got in filing fees, so that they have a total of about 75% up front. They've do the election, and then we do a final cost report on the back end to true it up and make sure that if they got too much money in the estimate, they pay it back, and if they didn't get enough, we supplement the difference.
Would it be your preference to control all that out of the Secretary of State's office and do all that on your own rather than funneling out the money? And
Well, we don't have a preference, but,
Right.
you know, there are pros and cons to doing it differently, yes.
Understood. Okay. Can you speak about the ballot by mail program, the strengthening, or perhaps putting a unique code on the ballot? Certainly, y'all looked at this before.
Certainly. You know, I want to say that mail ballot fraud is a very real phenomenon. It's
Yes, we
something
know.
that, you know, I think generally occurs in two ways. There's the out-and-out thief who applies for a ballot by mail in somebody else's name, trolls the mailbox, retrieves the ballot, and turns it in without that voter ever even knowing about it. I think my general impression is that that's less rare. That's more rare. So the more common way that it's done is elderly folks are assisted by an assistant who either does or doesn't list themselves as an assistant on the application or the ballot by mail that's returned. But that assistance sometimes is coercion, or sometimes the assistant actually fills out the ballot themselves and just has the voter sign the carrier envelope. And so that is much more prevalent form of voter fraud, and that is the kind that has been successfully prosecuted by the Attorney General's office in Cameron County and in Weslaco city election. It was the basis for overturning that Weslaco city council race. And I believe there are news reports that there's a similar investigation going on in Tarrant County right now. So that is the much more common form of mail ballot fraud, and basically it's taken advantage of elderly folks.
I'll follow up on that because it is ongoing in Tarrant County, but is it not required that they match the signatures of the voter registration card to the carrier envelope?
No. The voter registration application signature can be used if there's a question. So the first two signatures that they'll compare is the application for ballot by mail signature with the carrier envelope signature. Only if they can't decide, the early voting ballot board is the one that does this work. If they can't decide there's a match, they can go look at other signatures on file, including the VR signature. And the law currently is that that signature can only be used to help the voter. So if it confirms that the voter is the same person when you've got three exemplars, then they'll count the ballot. It can't be used against the voter.
Got it. Representative Fallon, do you have anything?
I did. Do you have any thoughts on the difference in penalties with this Caldwell County case of somebody voting twice in the primary and it only being a Class C misdemeanor, but if they did it in the general election, I believe it was a Class B felony? Is that right?
Yeah, there are different statutes involved, and so if you vote in the Democratic and Republican primary, that's one statute and has one criminal penalty. If you vote twice in exactly the same election, then that's 6412, and it's a much more serious crime. I don't know the policy.
I think we should fix that. Representative Goldman.
I will say that voters do not understand the primary election system and often don't understand why they can't vote in both.
But they should understand they should only vote once.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My mom taught me that.
My mom as well.
We weren't from Chicago. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next panel. Panel number 2 consists of Jim Barnes, Fern McClarty, good enough, and Norma Saldana. And you can correct me if I said any of those last names wrong, and I apologize.
I've got some handouts, and I've got some handouts, I don't know if it's okay to give them to you all.
Correct, you name their last name, yeah.
We'll pass it.
Yeah, there's her name there. Sure. I see it. Well, thank y'all very much for being here. Please introduce yourself, state your name and your organization you're with. When we call upon you, I'm going to strictly do this by alphabetical. I know we usually do ladies first, but I'll go alphabetical. And Mr. Barnes, if you want to start off. Oh, hold on one second, Mr. Barnes, I'm sorry. Let's make sure we have all this. Ms. Saldana?
Saldana.
Saldana. Did you register to testify?
Yes, I did.
Okay, let's just clarify that. She's on this, so I've got it on this. Right here, see?
Yeah, you called me.
And
I don't know
and
if
you
she
signed
heard
it
it.
outside also.
You did it on number 1. But you did not register.
Oh, I see. Okay, does she need to come up? Come on up here, Miss Sullivan. Sorry.
She's special.
You're right, exactly. We'll just get this all straight so we have.
I'm already in trouble.
No, you're fine.
She registered on the same kiosk I did
Okay,
just
all
before.
right, we're good, we're good. We'll get this cleared up. Mr. Barnes, if you want to start your testimony, and I'll return the chair to Chairwoman Laubenberg.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman, I guess. Here comes the Madam Chairman, or Chairwoman. My name is Jim Barnes. I live in Mission, Hidalgo County, Texas, right next to Starr County, and Brooks. I'm an election judge. I occasionally work as a ballot board clerk. I'm a member of the OWLS, which is Objective Watchers of the Legal System. I'm a Republican precinct chair, president of the McAllen Hidalgo County Tea Party, editor and publisher of the Valley Conservative Newsletter. I appreciate your asking us to come down here, up here, and speak. I would like to address one question in charge 2, a statement about registration and voter addresses. As an election judge, if a form is sent out from the elections department, it cannot be forwarded. I have had people come in and 3 years in a row say, how come I got to do a statement of residence again? I just did that a year ago. And I decided, oh, these people look like me, gray hair. I said, are you a winter Texan? And one guy got a little smart. He says, no, I'm a summer Iowan. But what they do is they leave a forwarding address and they go back to Iowa or Indiana or Minnesota for the summer. Unfortunately, the elections department sent something out and they are not allowed to forward it to post office, and so it comes back, and so their record is marked as needing a statement of residence. So I called our elections department and said, these, I believe, are winter Texans. So we've started putting on the statement of residence that they are winter Texans so they can have that as part of their file. Just thought I would add that. Voter photo ID has worked in our county, I believe. I haven't had any issues with any voters coming in. If an invalid ID was presented and we said it's not acceptable, usually the voter just merely leaves. We do offer a provisional ballot. Anyone who didn't have a valid one, we tell them they can go to DPS and get one. If it's an early voting, they got plenty of time to do it. Or they can file a provisional and go get the ID and then take it in. After the enactment of photo ID, we kind of thought that the mail-in ballot was the next possibility for voter fraud, since a photo is not required. In the polling location, our laptop computer advises us if a prospective voter had requested a mail-in ballot. We ask them if they want to cancel a mail-in ballot in order to vote electronically or let it stand. Of course, we never hear if they received it. They tell us they never received it. Do not know the reason why, but there's been comments made today about why that could happen. We will call the election department to cancel that mail-in ballot. If it had already been received, it is already considered a ballot, and no, it can't be canceled. And working the ballot board a few times, and there's 450 mail-in ballots all locked in a box, I can see why it'd be very time-consuming and almost impossible to find that one ballot that's already in. If it can be canceled, they are allowed to vote electronically if they show valid photo ID and sign the combination form. Some voters do get upset that their mail-in ballot is going to be canceled. But it has to be canceled in order to vote electronically. Sometimes you tell that to somebody and just say, okay, and they just leave the polling location. Voter fraud is definitely a problem in the Valley. Somebody mentioned Weslaco. I had a voter show up in early voting in La Jolla, which is west part of the county. And the computer said that he had voted 2 days earlier in Donna. I guess they don't understand the computer works like it does. And I says, no, you voted 2 days ago in Donna. You can't vote again. Well, I thought I could. Yeah, right.
Chicago.
10 minutes later, a politicaro brought his driver's license in and says, I have a curb service. My clerk says, isn't this the guy we just had here? Yes, it is. So I went out to the car with the politicaro that wanted to be the assistant and says, look, you already voted in Donna. I don't know how many other polling locations he went to, but he did not get to vote a second time. Okay, removing deceased voters from the voter rolls. The elections administrator asked Fern McClarity and I to look into how it is supposed to happen. She knows how it's supposed to happen, but she wanted to check on the system. But our time is limited, and I haven't made much progress on it. Fern was working on the healthcare district defeat, so I continued. I was working on a flow chart, collecting email addresses of city clerks and justice of the peace, and preparing memos to seek the information. What do they do with a deceased voter? Now, SB 795 adds another way of denial of citizenship at a jury pool for evading jury duty as a way to take them off the rolls if they say they're not a citizen. I did find out that those persons born in another state, the JPs, may be sending the death certificates to that state instead of the Secretary of State here in Austin. Also, I understand that Texas responses to federal courts suggest that it is the state of Texas' responsibility and not local election officials. I would like to continue this project, but I think it has to be decided whose responsibility it is. I think a common statewide program would be best, although I would like to still continue auditing the process in Hidalgo County. Lastly, voter photo ID and the federal court's action a few weeks ago. Texas Secretary of State added a reasonable impediment declaration form. As an election judge, I was not looking forward to getting back to the days anybody can just walk in and give us a bank statement and say, okay, I'm here to vote. I think this was a reasonable compromise, and I was quite concerned yesterday when I read the paper that now the federal judge in Corpus Christi has said that Texas did not play straight and wants to relook at it and make sure that the federal officials get a chance to look at the system. I don't trust the federal officials. I don't think they want voter ID, and I think they want people to be able to walk in and vote the day of the election without prior registration, which I think is a bad idea, particularly in the Valley.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, we want to focus on the absentee ballots. The absentee ballots.
Okay. Absentee ballots sometimes are a very large number of voters. And most of them say that they're over 65, and so I believe when you're over 65, you can have the absentee ballot sent to your home in the county. Or they're disabled or infirm. And I'm 73. I can still make it to the polls, but unfortunately not everybody can. Fern and I work together quite often, and we try to decide, is this person that registered to vote in 1972 filled out this form for an absent or mail-in ballot? I'm from Michigan, it's an absentee ballot. And is that the person that signed the envelope? And they don't always agree. Those are declined. Fern has to sign a letter to go to them. She has an interesting story on one of those that I will let her tell. When I was in Michigan, I worked for Delphi and General Motors. I was a troubleshooter. I could get a phone call on a Friday before Election Day and be on an airplane to India the next day. So as soon as I was allowed, I would go to the county clerk and say, I might be out of town and I won't know until Election Day. Can I vote an absentee ballot? And I could. Show my ID, fill out the form, vote, seal up the envelope, and then it'd be counted on Election Day. I thought that was a good system. I don't think you could sell it in Texas because we've had mail-in ballots too long. There's too many people that are relying on it, and we'd get a heck of a fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I go into it? Can I be next? Or?
Yes, are there any questions? Okay, no, thank you.
Good morning, committee and chairperson.
And if you'll introduce yourself. Okay.
My name is Norma Saldaña, and I'm here from Hidalgo County. I come before you from one of the poorest counties in the nation and one of the most corrupt as well. My testimony is on the politiqueras and the unique name, and that's a unique name in South Texas. We are like no other in any part of Texas. Let me start with a brief description on what a politiquera is. They are paid to turn out the vote. Very simple. They target the low-income neighborhoods, colonias, and adult daycares in our area. And in South Texas, we have an abundance of adult daycares. They take advantage of our abuelos and abuelas, our grandparents, if you're not of Hispanic or Mexican heritage, and our neighbors. They have been part of the Rio Grande Valley election process for decades. According, and actually today in today's newspaper, on the front page, let me read you a little bit about what was on the front page this morning. And it says, several recent cases have given South Texas a black eye. Last year, a video surfaced in court that showed a U.S. postal worker, a politiquera, and a middleman in Mission, Texas, arranging the sale of the mail-in ballots. The video appears to implicate our own Sheriff Guerra from Hidalgo County, though he has repeatedly denied the involvement in the case. In the video, the postal worker says he is willing to sell the mailing list of the addresses for $3,000. That case was referred to federal authorities last year, and no action has been taken up to now that we know of. In a separate case, politiqueras working for the Donna School Board members were caught stealing votes for money, drugs, and food. The case gave rise to now the infamous phrase, Coke for votes, and I don't mean the soft drink. During the testimony, Hidalgo County Commissioner A.C. Cuellar was also implicated, one of our county commissioners. When a politiquera told in court that she had worked for Cuellar, Cuellar has since denied also the wrongdoing. Sentences for the politiqueras involved in the case range from 6 months to home confinement up to a 1.5 years prison. How about punishment? There is no teeth down in South Texas. And that was in our today's paper, but let me continue. Since it was in today's paper, I really thought it was important that I bring it up. As I was saying, they're paid to turn out the vote. Also, as you know, we have an FBI task force just for us, for our area, McAllen, Texas, and Hidalgo County. And their job is to clean up public corruption and election fraud. One of the practices the task force is looking at is stealing votes. According to the Justice Department in 2013, more public officials were convicted for corruption in South Texas than any other region in the country, not the state, in the country. We had U.S. District Judge Crane quoted to the politiqueras as he was sentencing them. Our country requires that the voting process be clean and free of fraud in order for democracy to work. It may seem of a little inconsequential for a city to be paying for votes, but it's a matter of principle. And it's dangerous for this to occur without any consequence. These politiqueras in the Rio Grande Valley may have an impact, the politiqueras indictments in Rio Grande Valley had an impact because in the Cameron County election for 3 Justice of the Peace offices, the mail-in ballots dropped by 97%. That should tell us something. According to Leslie Gower, an experienced campaign strategist in the Rio Grande Valley, she stated, as long as the politiqueras are used, voter fraud will continue to be present. You can arrest them, but there's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed and solved. Legislation maintaining the integrity of our election process needs to be passed so politicians resort to a more honorable way to increase voter turnout for the population they seek to represent. We are asking for your leadership. Don't turn a blind eye. The political culture in South Texas is like no other. We need your help to get the integrity of the voting system back that has been taken advantage of for decades and decades in our area. I don't know if you have any in the election, if we have an elections division in the Attorney General's office that maybe can spearhead where we could work together with either the FBI, because down there, that's the way of life. They pick up our grandparents in caravans. There's a gentleman by the name of Vicente Gonzalez, and if you look at his caravans of vehicles, it says VG, Vicente Gonzalez 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, and they're going to the adult daycares and picking up our grandparents in droves, taking them to the polling places and bringing them back if they didn't do the mail-in ballot. Also, State Rep Aaron Peña, who is no longer a state rep, I think he now works for the Land Commission, presented a bill back in 2011. And we would ask this coming year legislation, if anything can be done, maybe if they assist a voter.
What was the legislation that he introduced?
It was a House bill by Peña, and it was House Bill number 304, and it went into, what did you say, Jim? Into committee, but it didn't pass. It died.
What year that was?
2011, I believe.
Oh, 2011.
And if I'm not accurate, I can find out.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, if assistance is provided by a person of the voter's choice, the person shall provide a photo ID to the election officer and the officer shall enter the person's name, address, and the poll list beside the voter's name. And then he also suggested a person should, under this section, may assist a voter, but no more than 2 voters a day, including assistance provided during the period for early voting by personal appearance and assistance provided under this section. Also, we would ask, if you do pass it, that we also pass safeguards so, like Jim said, they don't go from polling place to polling place. If they help 2, that's 2 throughout the county or throughout the per day. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members? Thank you.
All right. My name is Fern McClarity. I'm with the Owls, and I thank you for inviting us to come up here to tell you what's happening in Hidalgo County. If anything dirty can go on, I don't know about the gentleman a while ago that said that people are not doing it. It seems to being better. Not in Hidalgo County. I have a whole stack here if you would like to look at them. I didn't have the money to get y'all a copy, and myself have one, but the names of the 2 politicaras are here. Would you like to look at them?
You can hand that to the clerk and we'll
Because
hold on to that.
Because if you look at those are just one election. It's a runoff from Hidalgo, city of Hidalgo in the school district. And with the numbers, I believe there were 203 total. We had 17 that we flat rejected, and there were like 23, I believe, that were regular citizens that had requested a mail-in ballot. But then you'll see that the people that signed, there's 2 ladies, and they're politicaras. And one thing we would like to ask about the politicaras, that they have, if they're going to assist someone, that they should be a registered voter of that county, of the county they're in. It should be a citizen of the United States. We have a lot of people that are illegals that are politicaras. And they go out and they intimidate people. I have been on the ballot board also. I forgot to say I was the judge on this particular election there. And they intimidate. They had one lady one time come and she said, they told me that they were to fill it out. The politicaras were going to fill out the mail-in ballot, which she didn't request, and that she wanted to file charges. Our district attorney would not do anything. She was there. She wanted to file charges.
How do you become a politicara?
Sell your soul to whoever's running.
I mean, is there like...
No, you just who you know and how good you are, and if you got a car. And this is what once they're there, and if they can bring in those votes, whether it be for a plate of barbecue, we have found out that they bribe them with cocaine, with sex, and everything else you think of in Hidalgo County. We've got it, and so we want, what I would like to see, like I say, they need to be a U.S. citizen for one thing. They need to be a registered voter if they're so concerned about someone voting and getting an early voting ballot. Then they should be a concerned voter of Hidalgo County. Not for the money, but because they want the vote to count for whoever. All right, there should also be a punishment. I would love to see, like they were talking about just now, a B or a C or whatever. I wanted a felony, a piece of paper. I know that I swear that I will uphold the voters' rights and everything. What's a piece of paper? They can throw it in the trash. They don't care. I want to see, and please put some teeth in it, that if they do, they're caught. And make it a shall or whatever, that our district attorneys, our last 2 district attorneys, would not file anything against anyone when they had a witness. It happens. This is not right. Our military have died for us to have a right to vote, and we just sell it so easy. So we would like to see punishment. I want jail time. You know, I'm a gun instructor of the state of Texas, and I make sure that I do everything by the book, and I think they should have to do the same. Why not, whenever you read your code, it talks about the election. If an election officer, I believe it's section 33057, and it talks about a witness is entitled to be present at the voting station when a voter is being assisted by an election official, and that the watcher is entitled to examine the ballot before it is deposited in the ballot box, is determined whether it is prepared in accordance with the voter's wishes. This is what the politicaros do. They come up there, they are right there with the person that is voting, and instead of having an election official, which I would trust more because they work for the county, and hopefully we have hired good people, but they are there, and not only do they read the ballot sometimes for them and tell them, they push the buttons. And my thing is, we have teachers that come in, and they have to have an assistant because they work for a school district, they work for a city. And if these people do not vote, the voter does not vote the way they're supposed to, by the time they are carded back to the school or to the county, to the city, they're fired. You didn't vote the way you were supposed to. So this is what's going on. I trust the election people compared to a politicaro that comes in and has one motive. And why should they do the voting? Why is it not the voter? And like I say, we have people that are intimidated. They tell us all the time. Had one lady came in and at the ballot and said, I didn't order this, but they came to my home, a politicaro, and they said, if you don't fill this out, and you've got to sign it, but of course they filled in the voting, you're going to lose your house. The lady was scared to death. She said, well, whatever you want, I don't want to lose my home. There's nothing connected with your home and an election and a ballot. But this is what they tell them, and they're old, and they're scared, and they're easily persuaded. So I know that a disability, I don't understand. It says a qualified voter is eligible for early voting by mail if the voter has a sickness or a physical condition that prevents the voter from appearing at the polling place on election day without a likelihood of needing personal assistance or injuring the voter's health. We have people, and one of our elections was not 65, was not sick, was not out of the county, that received one and voted and worked on the ballot board for the Democratic side. Now, was she supposed to do that? Did anybody check? No. So again, penalty. Make them have a penalty. If you do this, you just lied. Aren't you supposed to swear that you're taking an oath? I swear them in when I have my ballot board. This is what we're talking about. If you put teeth in something, maybe they will stop this. She had no right to do this. The law states that only a person can be a witness for one time for that year. Again, why can't we have these politicaros, the witnesses, only have 2 a day? Instead, you can see right there, just one, right after the other, right after the other, right after the other, and next day they get up and do it again. Why? They're making money. It is a money-making deal for these people. Put a penalty. Let's stop it. If you can make a law that says one witness, how about just, I should be settled with one helper, but I'm stretching it. Let's have it 2 for that time. Put them out of business. They are buying votes. That's not what this election's about. Like I say, limit the time. The voter's signature card. This is one that I would like to talk about. They need, and we must pass a law that they have to update their voter registration card, their signature, at least every 2 to 4 years. Because when we look at signatures, we're in the law says confirm that the signature are those of the same person. That's what we're looking at. And if you get one and you're looking at the envelopes on the outside and they're completely different, and I have a copy of one here, the handwriting on one is absolutely beautiful. The other one is not. She was 95 years old. And we come to find out after we looked at the card, and we looked to see if they're disabled. We don't know what has happened. But if they had to redo the cards every couple of years, we could see that they have had a stroke. We could see that something's wrong. But this person, after we found out and things, it was the 70-year-old cousin that lived in the same home that had signed and requested the voter ballot to be sent to them, and she had voted for the 95-year-old and sent it in, not realizing that we would be checking because the handwriting was so different. So we would like, and I'm begging y'all to please pass a law that they have to go in and or have a card sent, but at least the signature brought up to date. We have cards that go back years. Only one. We're not able to take a sample and look to see as they're getting older. You know, our handwriting changes. I understand that. But if there's something wrong, but if at least we're able to know, we're able to catch more of these, because this is not just one. This happens all the time. So, like I said, we are the poll watchers when they're at the station and things, assisting people. Why are they allowed to come in and vote for the person? Because that's what they're doing. This is I don't understand why anyone thinks that it's all right for a politicare to either intimidate. And we know that they, in our Mission, Texas, I don't know how, I'm from Edinburgh, Mission's a little over, that a mailman, and we know this happens over and over, we can't prove it, but this one was aired on the news and everything, that the postman was selling the addresses where these voter ballots were going, and then the politicares would follow and go in, knock on the door. May I help you, please? You know, I'm here. And they stay with them. And what gets me, when we reject a ballot that's been sent because they're nowhere in the state are they a registered voter with us, and so we have to reject it. Do you know that they turn right around and send them a voter registration card and register the person that was trying to cheat, that was not registered? My thing is, why in the world are we registering them for the next election? Why are we not arresting them? They were doing something illegal. They tried to vote, and they were not a registered voter. But no, we turn around and send them a card. We're going to register up right and make sure they can vote. Do y'all see a problem with that one? Disability. I know that we can't discriminate that someone was sick, nor do they have a physical condition. But we have cities that come and we watch, as the Owls, we watch elections, and the whole town is disabled. There wasn't one person that was going to go inside. They were sitting in the car. They had to bring out the curb service and have them vote with someone watching a politicare. This was early voting that we watched. This was sick. I said, how in the world does this town stay alive if all these people have some kind of an ailment and they can't get out of the car to vote or whatever? How are they getting to work? What's happening there? So, again, this was so a politicare was in the car with them. They drive them, like she said, they go with the nursing homes, they go to the adult daycare, and they're vanning constantly the whole election, early voting, one after another, sometimes several in a van. The politicare is there. They go in, and you can watch, and they'll be talking. You'll see that the voter's not voting. They're putting it there. So this is where we need y'all to make a law to please. If they're going to do it, they're going to make money, at least they're going to take a chance of going to jail. And you've got to make the law that make it, because our district attorneys have not done it down there. Our last one and the one we've got now, this is not a crime. There's not enough evidence. There's always some problem when things are happening. So we're just asking, like I say, I know I have more things to talk about, but anything that you can think of, the gentleman said it's getting better. Not in Hidalgo County. And, like I say, to me, a vote is so endearing to the person that the people have died for you to have a right to do this, and then they sell it so easily, or they're intimidated by a group of people. Most of the time they're women, not always. But y'all need to help stop this. This is got to stop. I've got some other laws, and like I said, the main thing I kept looking at was the updating the signature card at least every 2 to 4 years, so that the ballot board can see that the signature was the right person and not completely, because like I said, we had to pull it up to look because it was so massively different.
So
I would like to add to that. The elections administrator and I have discussed this issue about enforcement and the fact that local law enforcement is not going to take a stand or do anything. She once asked that she have fraud investigators in the DA's office assigned to her to investigate election fraud. He says, well, I got 2 people. Yeah, but they never come over and talk to her about what kind of election fraud that we're seeing. We used to have a form. She would ask us to fill out a form about anything that we thought was not quite right, but we didn't have grounds to say no, but maybe somebody should investigate it. The attorneys found out that we had this form, and Freedom of Information Act got them all. So she stopped it. We don't fill out a form anymore. I'll probably be in West County again this election. The school board is the biggest employer in town. There's 10 candidates running for 4 seats. One of them is also an official with the housing district in that city. He was just arrested for fraud. He's also on the school board. I think I'm going to have fun. Politicaros fight outside all the time. I have a rough time keeping them outside the 100-foot circle, but I will put them on the police car and send them away if they don't, and they know it.
So, in your view, the politicaros work primarily through the absentee ballot?
And also, and they also pick them up at the adult daycares mostly. They target, I'm not sure how many adult daycares we have in the valley, but we have, just in the city of Edinburgh, probably over 20 or 30. For a population of 100,000 or so, that's massive. And so they pick them up in caravans, and they're going. I have a petition, because we have a hot ballot issue right now with a healthcare district for a for-profit. And one of my neighbors signed the petition, and I went to see him. I said, did you know you were signing for a tax? He goes, no. I said, and these signatures, because he works for Recuerdos Adult Daycare, which is incidentally owned by or run by Terry Canales, the state rep from here, his wife. And he said, oh, most of those signatures are the residents of the adult daycare. What does that tell you? They give them free access to our grandparents, and then they manipulate them.
So, like I said, we would like y'all to put some teeth in this. That little piece of paper is a joke that they sign that says that they're doing the right thing. So if you would please, and also, like I said, put a limit on how many they can do. Why are they able to have open season on the voters in Hidalgo County? And that we would ask, why in the world are we able to register the voter when they had signed up? They were lying at the time. They were not a registered voter. Why aren't they punished for that? Why isn't there something there? I'm sorry.
No, thank y'all very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One thing I neglected to mention to Ms. Saldana when you brought up Representative Pena's bill 304 is that was almost all of his bill and some other things were in a bill that I filed last session, House Bill 3178, and this committee voted it out. Everybody who was here today voted for that bill. It didn't make it all the way through the process. I will be trying again.
Okay. Oh, God, please do.
I mean, we understand that despite all the lollipops and rainbow talk we hear that there's no voter fraud, there is rampant voter fraud in parts of this state. What we hear all the time is, well, there haven't been a lot of convictions, therefore it's not happening. I can tell you, I live on a street that is sort of the main thoroughfare through my subdivision. People speed on my street day and night. If you went by the number of tickets, you would say it never happens.
That's right.
We understand. I've read the stories in the New York Times about the politicaros down there.
Yes.
And when we
understand there's rampant cheating.
And when we get our own FBI task force for political corruption and voter fraud, that should tell you something. Thank you.
So, like I say, it's our lives are in your hands. Your committee is that important. So, if you'll please help us, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is that it?
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Yes. Okay, the next panel will be, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have a request from a member for the AG's office. Are y'all here? Here we go. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's all right. I want to follow. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank y'all for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Rep. Golden.
Thank y'all. First of all, thank y'all very much for coming
Thank
up.
you
Really
for coming.
appreciate it. And I just want to follow up. Y'all heard their testimony. I want to hear from the Attorney General's office of, do we take these?
I think they need to introduce themselves.
Oh, okay. Why don't
Yeah.
y'all go ahead and introduce yourselves? And then
My name is Jonathan White. Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee. Jonathan White with the Attorney General's Office. I'm an Assistant Attorney General in the White Collar Crime and Public Integrity Division, or section, in the Criminal Prosecutions Division, and I've prosecuted election fraud cases for about the last 7 years.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but y'all may want to stay and listen to this. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you.
My name is Forrest Mitchell, and I'm a criminal investigator with the Texas Attorney General's Office. I am currently the major overseeing the operations of the Special Investigations Unit, which is the unit that's charged with the responsibility of investigating election complaints that are referred to our office. I've been with the AG's office since 1997, and I've been the supervisor of that unit since 2005, and I've been involved in investigating and reviewing election complaints throughout the state.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. So let's just start with you, if I may, sir. Have you heard about such complaints coming out of Hidalgo County? And do we turn these over to the FBI, or do we handle these within the Attorney General's office, or where does such complaints go? How does the system work?
It depends, and I have some prepared remarks about the referral process and investigation process. If you
Right with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As I said, my name is Forrest Mitchell, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today about this. I'd like to talk about the referral process and how we get allegations of misconduct at the AG's office. Like a lot of law enforcement agencies, we are reactionary in that we respond to complaints or allegations. We don't proactively investigate election complaints. There are a number of reasons for that. But we typically get our complaints from the Secretary of State's office, is one of the referral sources, and they receive complaints from, losing candidates or voters or people who have witnessed something that they didn't feel comfortable with. It could also be, somebody who runs an adult daycare center or a nursing home. And another source of our complaints comes from the actual local elections administrators themselves. I heard testimony today about Starr County, and years back, one of the cases that was referred to our office, the local elections administrator said, "Hey, I'm sending, 20 ballots to this house, or I'm sending 20 ballots to this mailbox. Something's not right," and that started one of our investigations. Other sources include local law enforcement, or other state law enforcement, or the FBI. We have collaborated with the FBI on investigations in the past, and continue to do so as the opportunities arise. And then finally, also DA's offices. DAs and county attorneys will ask us to come in and assist them in investigations of misconduct. So once we get these referrals, we
Okay,
may.
I'm going to interrupt just real quick. So basically, you can't do anything unless you get a referral from another official group.
Yes, ma'am. We don't normally investigate anything that's
Right.
not referred to our office, and that's one of our requirements.
And it's not a direct citizen referral. It has, as you said.
Generally, if
Yeah.
a citizen or a losing candidate would contact our office and want to make a complaint, we would refer them to the Secretary of State's office to file a written complaint. And one of the reasons for that is there are many complaints about
Right.
elections, and many of them are not criminal in nature. They may be
Gotcha.
administrative or procedural, and we only have a limited number of investigators and prosecutors who can review these.
Okay.
Can you touch on that? How many do you have?
I have a team of investigators that do this. It's about 8 or 9,
8 or 9
and we work statewide.
to cover the whole state. 8 or 9.
27 million people.
Well,
I don't know.
so So if a citizen, like a citizens group, if they have a complaint or concern, they can go to the Secretary of State directly and make the complaint, and then the Secretary of State would come to you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. They could also go to the local elections administrator and make the complaint. They could go to the DA's office and make the complaint.
Okay.
And so,
Those are three different avenues.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Those are how the referrals start. And when we're starting to talk about specifically mail-in ballot fraud, once we get those complaints, it may just be with specific voters whose ballots are questioned. Or in some cases, we may have allegations that it's widespread misconduct. And so our investigators will either have to obtain or potentially even seize election records in those cases and review volumes of material to try to identify the people who are assisting the voters in the completion of the application for the ballot, or also suspects who may have been involved in voting those ballots with those voters. So we spend a great deal of our time reviewing large amounts of applications. Once those reviews are done, we may or may not have been able to identify our suspects, because not all of the campaign workers who are doing this identify themselves on that mail-in ballot application. And so we then have to go out into the jurisdictions in Texas and all over the state and interview voters who cast their ballots by mail one by one to try to identify these suspects. And we may not be able to identify these suspects because the voters, many times we come months after the fact. You know, the allegation may be made and we may not get a referral for 2 or 3 months. And by the time our investigators are ready to hit the streets, 6 months may have passed. Well, and in that regard, there may have been another election that has occurred, and some of these voters are confused about who helped them. We may only have a partial identity. The person's name is Joe. The person's name is Mr. Smith. The person, here's his phone number. He told me to call when the ballot is turned, when I get the ballot in the mail. And so eventually we'll figure out, oh, it's Mr. Joe Smith and here's his phone number. And so we can go back to that voter later on if we can identify that suspect and try to make a case. So, but one of the difficulties that we encounter when we investigate these allegations is that quite often the voters don't remember. They don't have clear memories of an interaction that wasn't very significant at that time. And it's very difficult to make these cases when we don't have solid witnesses who can testify about this in court.
What can we do to make it better?
Give him more investigators.
I think one of the comments they brought up, the Owls brought up, were the multiple, one person handing multiple carrier envelopes.
I could talk about that a little bit. And, one of the difficulties that we've had, and we've had cases, significant cases, where we have caught suspects with a large amount of envelopes. And we continue to see cases where there are suspects who have large amounts of envelopes. The difficulty is penalties are enhanced by the number that you have. And so, but being able to prove that you have it in exactly a specific amount at one time, 6 months after the fact, is quite difficult.
Okay.
For our investigators to say, did this person have 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20? Nobody's going to have either counted or they don't remember.
So there's really no way of knowing.
Well, we had a case in South Texas and it was again in Starr County, where we had a suspect who was a county commissioner, who the post office informed us that he was in possession of 56 ballots, which would have been a felony offense. But that was reduced to a misdemeanor offense by the local prosecutor.
Madam Chair?
Yeah. Oh, Representative Schofield.
There was one thing I missed in your testimony. Was the system by which you only take cases that are referred to you, is that jurisdictional or a matter of resources?
It's mostly a matter of resources.
So you have the jurisdiction. If we gave you enough manpower, you would have the jurisdiction to go and conduct your own investigations under current law?
Under the current law, under
Chapter 273 of the Elections Codes, if voters provided affidavits, that could cause either our office, the district attorney's office, or the county attorney's office to investigate a complaint.
Okay, so it must originate with a voter.
Yes, sir.
Can I follow up real quick? Sorry, you heard the testimony of the people from Hidalgo County, and they mentioned the FBI. So at what point does the FBI come in, and do they supersede y'all? Is it the same investigation? Did they get there before y'all got there? How does that work?
It depends. It depends on the allegation, and it depends on the case and the election involved. Many times someone complains to the FBI at the same time that they're complaining to the local elections administrator or the Secretary of State's office, and so we may be conducting investigations simultaneously. Once we recognize that, we try to collaborate on those investigations.
And have y'all been down in Hidalgo County to investigate?
Yes, sir. We have Hidalgo County is one of the counties that we've had many complaints and have been working for years on.
Any prosecutions?
Yes, sir, we have. Some of the cases we have prosecuted in adjoining counties, which is something that's authorized by the code. But those cases originated in Hidalgo County.
Gotcha.
So did the cases come to you from the Secretary of State's office?
They are primarily our source of referrals.
Are there ongoing cases now? I didn't.
Yes, ma'am. We're conducting investigations as we speak.
Okay.
Are you in Tarrant County?
I'd rather not comment on any kind of ongoing investigations.
Understood.
Or acknowledge the existence of any.
Understood.
There's also some reasons, and I want to talk to you all about statistics as well. And when I talk about statistics for our office, I want to preface it that we only know what we know. We only know what has been reported to law enforcement. If mail-in ballot fraud has gone undetected, we would have no idea that it's going on.
Right.
But we are informed of mail-in ballot fraud from, elections officials who notice something fishy, or voters who've had their ballots canceled out when they go to the polling place and they realize that they voted by mail. So that's what we know. And we do not know what local district attorneys are prosecuting or the complaints that they're receiving, and we don't know what local law enforcement has received. And we also don't know what the FBI and the Department of Justice has unless we cross paths and work together. But some of our statistics, of the complaints and election cases that are referred to our office, we have had complaints in 144 of the 254 counties in Texas. So more than half of the counties in Texas have had some sort of complaint alleging misconduct.
I'm sorry, since when?
Since 2002 to August of last month. 144
out of 254?
That's correct. The Secretary of State's office is responsible for about 434 of the referrals that we've tracked since 2002. And a number of those, about 260, involved voters who were potentially deceased back in 2012, whose names appeared as voting in the 2012 elections. Additionally, we've had about 252 complaints or referrals from local elections officials, DAs, law enforcement, or other agencies. And of all of those cases combined, we've had 93 prosecutions that we've initiated at the AG's office or in cooperation with local prosecutors. And of those 93 prosecutions, 10 of those were dismissed for various reasons in the interest of justice or evidentiary issues. And of the 93 prosecutions, 40 of those dealt with mail-in ballot fraud in some type or form. Now, that could be a prosecution for a misdemeanor ballot handling or method of returning the marked ballot, or it could be for illegal voting or unlawful assistance in that process. So, but many of these cases are misdemeanor offenses, and we're devoting a ton of resources, hundreds of investigative hours to try to identify suspects involved in mail-in ballot fraud. And many times, the only prosecution involved is a misdemeanor offense. So
does that need to be strengthened? Would that give you more teeth?
I think more severe penalties make it make it helpful for us to try to get folks to cooperate with the state in prosecutions. So.
Madam Chair?
Oh, Rep. Schofield.
In your dealings with local DAs, do you feel that enhanced penalties would make them more likely to prosecute as opposed to saying this is a misdemeanor, it's just not worth my time when they're triaging their workload?
Do you want me to jump in?
Yes, sir.
Do you want me to jump in from
Please.
a prosecutor's perspective? I think it would, just because the resources that are involved in investigating and prosecuting these types of cases are very high, probably beyond the scope of many, many local DA's offices in less populated parts of the state. But absolutely, you would try a felony case before you try a misdemeanor case. There's a lot of attitudes about election fraud in different areas of the state that will affect a local DA's willingness or eagerness to proceed on an election fraud case, but having a felony level offense would certainly increase the amount of cases that, from a prosecutor's perspective, that are going to come from mail-in ballots.
In my view, this is doubly serious. If somebody steals one vote, if somebody comes in my neighborhood and registers a fake person and votes them, it cancels out my vote, and I've effectively been disenfranchised. If a politicaro or somebody like that intimidates a voter into either voting against who they would have voted for, like in a school board election where they might have voted for another candidate, that rips that voter off and a voter who wanted to vote for the other candidate. And that is to me, it's very hard to get a more serious public offense than one in which you're stealing votes in an election.
If I could respond to that, because I have some thoughts similar to that in my notes, that I think that's exactly right. And illegal voting is a second-degree felony, punishable by 2 to 20 years in prison and a $10,000 fine.
That's for the individual.
Illegal voting for an individual who votes when they're not eligible to vote, or impersonates a voter, or is a non-resident, non-citizen, those sorts of things. Okay, so that's one stolen vote that's a second-degree felony. But with ballot harvesting, you don't necessarily have one stolen vote. You may have 100 stolen votes. But what we have is 100 Class B misdemeanors, which is
nothing.
And it's a prosecution nightmare. That's 100 different complaints and informations that have to be drafted to charge these people with 100 cases that if the defense attorney requests must be tried separately and independently, and evidence from those other 99 cases cannot be introduced in the evidence. We have to prove up one voter, one case at a time, and it's a Class B misdemeanor.
Allow me to ask you about that. The folks who are opposed to election law reform will often use the term voter impersonation. They try to make it look like it's just one person taking my vote as if they're going to vote pretending to be me. In the complaints that you have seen, which predominates? Is it one person trying to illegally vote, or is it organized groups trying to vote en masse and take massive numbers of votes?
It's certainly organized groups engaging in vote harvesting. And we do get quite a number of illegal voting cases, and quite a number of those are indicated on our prosecutions list. And Forrest just told us that I think 43 out of 90 cases involved ballot harvesting or vote harvesting, whatever you want to call it.
So our target is not one person mistakenly voting when he's not supposed to, or somebody who's voting in elections. It's organized mass attempts to steal votes and steal the entire election.
Correct, and mistakes are something we don't prosecute in the first place, but even so, individual attempts at illegal voting or successful attempts at illegal voting are a certain percentage of those, and I'll tell you they're probably more highly represented on our list of resolved prosecutions than the vote harvesting is proportionately, just because it's very difficult to successfully get convictions on Class B misdemeanors. I've got a second-degree felony to work with over here on my illegal voting. I can do a lot with that. I get in district court, I get a jury of 12, I can put on a case. There's a lot more that I can do when I'm working with a Class B misdemeanor in a county 5 hours from Austin, where they have different views on what that whole process means and entails. So
I'm glad to find that, because what I see anecdotally, I'm from the largest county in the state, I'm from Harris County, If I see an illegal alien registered to vote, I doubt very much an illegal alien was trying to get into our elections and vote. Some group wanted to put a whole bunch of names on the list so they could vote a whole bunch of names. And to me, that's the target we need to be naming it. It's not individual voters. We're not trying to keep any individual person who has any right to vote from voting. It's folks who want to get names on the list of people who aren't really going to vote that they can then vote. That is our real target, in my estimation.
And I think that's a fair point. And again, the illegal vote, the way that the penalties are set up are to punish the individuals who are engaging in one stolen vote or a double vote or an ineligible vote. And, we give Class B misdemeanors to those who are essentially stealing hundreds of votes. So that's the point that I would like to make in terms of penalties. Is this is something we ought to probably take a look at. I'm not telling you guys what to do. I'll tell you other states, Florida, New York, California, have pretty much a baseline of felony for any type of fraud that involves.
That was the other question. So what do other states do?
Well, again, I think that baseline of a low-degree felony is what we're seeing in all three of those states for offenses that involve fraud. In fact, California has a blanket law that addresses any and all fraud pertaining to a vote, and that's vaguely worded. We word our statutes a little more specifically in Texas. They do things a little more differently in California, obviously, in a lot of ways. But that's a felony. They start any fraud in an election pertaining to voting is a felony. So, we have a lot of offenses that are Class B misdemeanors that are voting fraud, certainly. So that's a baseline level of we're dealing with felonies immediately.
That deals with the level of punishment. But in terms of the target, as you said, the individual person voting isn't really where most of the fraud is happening. Would a state-level RICO statute that punished the organized crime activity of conducting a vote harvesting operation or an illegal registration operation or an illegal voting operation, would that be useful to prosecutors in Texas?
I've actually thought for several years now that including election code offenses, voting offenses under Chapter 72 of the Penal Code, engaging in organized criminal activity, it would just be a one-liner, would really go a long way toward cracking ballot harvesting operations. The difficulty we have with ballot harvesting is getting up chain to the handlers and to the candidates that pay the street-level ballot harvesters, or politicaires as they're called in South Texas. Very difficult to impute intent to the people who pay the politicaires and prove that they intended for that politicaire not to fill in their information on the back of the carrier envelope saying they assisted, or that they've instructed the ballot harvester to unlawfully assist a voter. No, we want them to do these things lawfully, of course. So getting up the chain is nearly impossible.
Legally,
the current statutes
through the legal system. But if we enhanced the penalties and had a RICO statute, the way that was used against Cosa Nostra was you got the lower level soldier and he ratted out the boss in order to keep from going away for a long period of time. I grew up in New Jersey, and so I still sometimes speak the language. I have to translate. But would that help? Would the politicaros be more likely to turn on the people who are now insulated, who are actually running this? Somebody's paying them. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. Would they be more likely to rat them out if there was a RICO statute, and if they didn't have to have the ballots in their hands all at once? The fact that they did 10 over the course of a week would be, and I believe I had a bill for that too, would that be helpful?
Very possibly, not only because of increased penalties, which I think that we need to begin with, a base penalty level of state jail felony, let's say, as our kind of default that we go to for fraud. But above and beyond that, our engaging in organized criminal activity statute under Section 72 of the Penal Code is our RICO statute here in Texas, and it enhances the underlying offense by 1 degree also. That provides more leverage and more teeth to the state in prosecuting.
And it just makes practical sense. Why would you, at the AG's office, spend all your time on a misdemeanor case when you've got all these other cases that are much higher level?
If those are the penalties that we have, and that's what we have to work with, and obviously we don't ignore large sections of offenses just because it's difficult or time-consuming and a waste.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And to finish up on the EOCA issue, just adding election code offenses under Section 72 as underlying offenses, because they're all specified under the statute, would do exactly that. And the advantage there is it lowers the burden of proving all of those elements and imputing that specific intent of unlawfully assisting the voter or failing to put the information on the back of the form all the way up chain, because it breaks out the individual actors into their roles, and then the roles where they're insulated from those bottom level activities, in which that's how RICO works, is casting the net and picking up the different layers of the organization. So it would do exactly that.
And the RICO statute was passed in 1970, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So we've had, since they started picking it up, and they really started in the mid-'80s with the mafia, since that time, has any federal court ruled that it was unconstitutional to prosecute under a RICO statute?
Not to my knowledge.
Mine neither. Thank you.
Brett Fallon.
Hey, thanks, Schofield.
Could you talk a little bit about the Medrano case?
Yes, it's over and it's resolved. And
For those that may not know, yeah, please.
What would you like to know? Because I was the prosecutor and I could go on for way too long.
Maybe the best and highlights in 2-3 minutes. Or maybe a little longer, but it's fascinating. I'd like the committee to hear it.
The Medrano family has a history in Dallas politics going back many, many years, and I don't want to say too much regarding that, but I'll say in the case that I prosecuted, we ended up charging, I believe, 7 or 8 members of the family for illegal voting based on residency schemes. There was also a felon voting who was harbored by one of the family members at his address there in the district. And it's a small district, kind of, I guess it's near the medical district in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And the family owns probably 50, 60 properties, rental properties in that area, and they basically control it. They call it Medrano land. So we investigated, generally in the 2010 election, there were several other prosecutions that came out of that, not just the Medrano family. There were some vote harvesting operations going on as well that we believe were connected with that candidate and another. But Carlos Medrano ran for Justice of the Peace, Precinct 5. He unseated by a couple of hundred votes the incumbent, whose name is Luis Sepulveda, and he was one of the complainants in the case. Mm-hmm. And we ended up had a trial before the court and not by jury, and the results were kind of mixed, split the baby. We convicted Carlos Medrano for illegal voting, for having his nieces register to vote in the district when they lived out in Mesquite. We had smoking gun evidence of the cover-up and the conspiracy, and these girls did not live there. There were other members of the family that we weren't ultimately able to prove to this judge didn't actually live there, but were voting from there. But it was essentially a residency case. Some vote harvesting stuff was tangential that wasn't actually connected back in a part of that case.
And what happened with the election itself? Was it overturned?
It was not. And here's a big hurdle. We have a huge hurdle in our cases to prove facts beyond a reasonable doubt. And we have issues with witnesses like Mr. Mitchell referred to earlier. The biggest problem they have in an election contest is they can prove these votes were illegally cast, that they were harvested, or that these people didn't actually live in the district, or they weren't eligible, and these are bad votes. They have to additionally prove who they voted for. And obviously we have secret ballots, so there's no way to do that without the cooperation of the voters and the witnesses. And if you don't have that, you cannot prove your election contest case, and you will lose every time you can prove.
Beyond a reasonable doubt that the Medranos didn't vote for the Medranos?
No. Well, clear and convincing in the election contest, okay. But you had a couple of residency issues there, but there was a lot of ballot harvesting that I think was probably a part of that civil case that wasn't a part of our criminal prosecution, and that was probably the basis for. And I think that the number of mail-in votes cast for the candidates was this. I don't remember the numbers now. It's been maybe 6 years, but they were so far apart when all of the other numbers, early voting and voting day, regular voting numbers are neck and neck, and then you see this huge spike in mail-in ballots. Well, that's an indicator that there may have been some mail-in ballot fraud.
So what happened to the fellow that was convicted? What was his sentence?
Let's see. I guess it was it 5 years probation and 180 days jail as a condition of probation. We were able to get that.
Probation, then he would go to jail.
Carlos Medrano was convicted at a bench trial, one count of illegal voting, ineligible voter, and sentenced to 5 years TDCJ, probated for 5 years, 180 days of jail as a condition of probation, with a $2,500 fine, and he was removed from office.
The condition of probation, what does that mean? Does that mean he has to go to jail for 180 days, or only if he violates
No, that is an actual 180 days to do, and he did that.
Okay.
Served him in Rockwell County Jail.
Okay. Thank you. Well, good work.
Thank you. I asked for more.
Yeah. We would want more. And we have to do our jobs in fixing. So was he convicted of a misdemeanor then? Or
That's a felony. Felony 3 at that time.
Because it was an individual.
Correct. Although at that time it was a third-degree felony for illegal voting. He was charged as a party. He actually had someone illegally vote.
Well, Madam Chair, while we have a prosecutor and investigator here, if you could wave a magic wand and we make you king of Texas for the day, what would you like to see us do, and what legislation be passed vis-a-vis these kinds of cases?
Okay.
To put more, as the very patriotic lady said, more teeth into these things.
Right. I would politely decline the offer to be king for the day, but I do have a few.
All right, George Washington, go ahead.
Ideas. I think I would wisely decline that. But we've already discussed penalties. You know, we need proportional penalties for mail-in ballot harvesting. We're talking about essentially stolen votes, and if democracy stands for the principle of one person, one vote, vote harvesting stands for the principle of one person, 100 votes, because that vote harvester is essentially imposing their voice on 100 stolen votes. So I think that we need to bring those up to par, and we also need to look at ways to potentially tighten the process more. In other words, restricting vote harvesting is not about restricting the voter from getting the assistance that they might need at all. It's about whether or not we want paid vote harvesters going around and offering assistance to voters. Now, the clear intent of our Texas law, if you look under section 64.036, unlawful assistance, it's clear that we want voters asking for assistance and not harvesters or assistants asking voters, do you need assistance? Can I give you some assistance? We could clarify that more and put some more teeth into that so that it's actually more prosecutable and we can have a line there. But even that would not prevent the situations where it was described earlier in testimony in South Texas, where you have essentially a school district assigning someone to go assist voters to make sure that they vote the right way, and that person's going to be required when they get there, yes, this person's assisting me, absolutely, and they take them through the process, and that vote gets cast the way it's supposed to be, and it goes on, that would go undetected most of the time. But
Madam Chair, I had a bill for that too. The witnesses today have been very kind to my bills.
The point being, it won't completely solve the problem just to draw the line there and say we want voters choosing an assistant and not assistants choosing voters, because their will is still going to be imposed on voters that can be intimidated. What New York has done is they've assisted the total number of assistances that can be provided by any one person in an election to two times. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm stating that backwards. Florida has imposed that hard limit on a number of 2. That's all you can assist in a single election. So that's one way to come at it. The other way is the way that New York has done it, which has said, okay, we don't care how many times, but a voter can choose any assistant when a voter needs assistance, that assistant needs to be a member of their immediate family, a spouse, or someone who lives with them at their address. Now, that's a completely different way to go about it, but it's a legitimate way that New York has chosen, I think. I think that could even be loosened up more to say a caregiver would be included perhaps in that list, maybe someone besides immediate family, expand that out to a couple layers of family as well. And that's going to cover everyone that needs assistance. I guess the two approaches are not mutually exclusive. You could have both. But those are kind of, I think, some of the ways of getting a handle on the universe of, are we going to have people out there that are in the business of going around and pushing assistance on people who don't need it? So that's number one, besides penalties, would be that.
Rep. Schofield.
Again, thank you for promoting my bill. So the purpose of either approach, the total number of people helped or somebody being related, is to make sure that there aren't people hanging around the voting area all day, essentially asserting their will and casting multiple votes as opposed to the voters casting the votes. Is that basically the core of it?
Yes, that and going out and pursuing the mail-in ballots and forcing themselves on the voters that way, or, as was testified to previously, if they're not doing the mail-in ballots, rounding up people and then bringing them into the polls that way, or doing the curbside voting, which is the way that if you seal up mail-in ballots, the next place they're going to go is curbside voting.
Right. And so this was the purpose of House Bill 54 that the House passed back in 2003. It was Representative Wollen's bill, and it was the first time they put any restrictions on it so that people couldn't get a list of who was going to get these ballots, go to their house and intimidate them. And we're finding through testimony today that they're sometimes buying access to that information and still getting it. But the difference is that's illegal, and we can prosecute that if we give you the resources to do it. But I was very impressed with your testimony today. We've been working hard to try to eliminate some of these things, and my mind is always working to try to see if we do this, how will people intimidate or affect a voter. We get everything from people saying, oh, you have to make sure the voting machine spit out a receipt. Well, I know if you spit out a receipt with who you voted for, there are parts of this state where you'll have to take it out into the parking lot and show the bosses you voted for who you were supposed to, or your dad doesn't get to keep his job. And so there, in all of these ways, I mean, basically there's a common theme of all of this, which is to make sure the voter is casting their vote and not somebody else. And thank you very much for your testimony.
You're more than welcome. If I could clarify one thing on that. There's a big difference between witnessing a ballot and assisting with a ballot. A witness is someone who, if the voter can't sign their name, they make a mark. And a witness witnesses that that's their mark. We don't see any cases like that. So the law does, our current law does limit a person to 2 times witnessing a voter's signature. That could be done with assistance as well. But as it stands, any person can provide assistance to an unlimited number of voters and expose them, to the risks that entails, as long as they provide their information on
Risks of intimidation.
Risks of intimidation and suggestion of whom to vote for. Yes. Also, elderly people will sometimes hand over. We don't see. We see more than a few of these. We'll hand over blank ballots to the harvester. Now, that falls between an unlawful assistance and it falls short of an illegal voting. So we're still talking about, a Class A misdemeanor when that's a completely stolen vote, So there's a lot of things we could talk about, and we may take this up another time, but I did want to make the clarification on the witnessing issue because that came up earlier. Witnessing is basically a non-issue from our perspective. Assisting is a major issue.
Gotcha. Thank y'all so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Next panel, and this is our last one for this charge, is Bruce Sherbert, the election administrator for Collin County, I'm happy to say, and Mr. Ben Stuhl, representing himself. And we're going to let you go first, Mr. Stool, because I know you've
Thank
got a
you.
plan. Thank you for being very patient. Thank you for coming in. If you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Ben Stool. I'm an attorney in Dallas, and as the chair mentioned, I'm here on my own behalf, not on behalf of my law firm. Go ahead and introduce yourself, because this is going to be...
Bruce Sherbet, Collin County Elections Administrator.
Back in the year... Well, it started right after 2001 when in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, when I was there in the Public Integrity Division, I was what was referred to as the election fraud prosecutor. And we had...
I want to interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
Bruce, you also forgot to say, how many years were you the Dallas County election administrator?
I'm probably the longest current serving elections administrator. 24 years with Dallas County and 2 years with Ellis County, and since December, my beloved Collin County, I've served as the elections administrator. So over 30 years in elections administration added up.
When I first met Bruce, he had to comb his hair in the morning.
Yeah, I had hair, yes.
That's what elections will do to you. We had a confluence that really kind of created a perfect storm. One of the rules of thumb that I have found with elections is that it's somewhat counterintuitive. The smaller the election is, the more trouble it is. The smaller the territorial jurisdiction, the smaller the number of voters you're dealing with, frequently causes even more problems because it takes fewer votes to go one way or the other. And we had a May election with a runoff where the election itself, we had all kinds of things going on, and then the runoff, all these political operatives from other campaigns flooded into the remaining single-member districts that were left, and it was amazing. We had people having their doors knocked on 10, 20 times a day by all different people. I mean, it was an amazing phenomenon to see. But in looking into it and trying to do something with any of it, it became apparent very quickly that the tools in the election box, in the election code, were not ever going to get me there. Which is why I asked for permission to see if somebody would author a bill and take it through the legislature, which is what ultimately happened in 2003 with House Bill 54. And I worked very closely with Bruce on that and others. It wasn't just the two of us, but we did spend the majority of the time crafting that thing. And it had to go through a number of revisions. It was authored by Representative Steve Woolens and sponsored by Senator Florence Shapiro in the Senate. And, I came down here and testified on it, as did Bruce. And so it was quite an undertaking. One of the things that happened that the previous speakers were talking about, the statutes that they were using, some of the statutes they were using didn't exist before we did that. A number of those things got in there because we put them into House Bill 54. They just weren't there before. So, and that's, I saw in looking at it that it just wasn't, I just wasn't going to get anywhere with the way that the code was at that time. We know we got somewhere because after House Bill 54 went into effect, we undertook considerable efforts in Dallas County jointly to hold meetings at the Elections Department, and put the word out to all the campaigns and anybody that was involved in the process to come, and we were going to give a presentation and did give presentations about how does this work now? What do we do now if we want to, in other words, to comply? And those were very well attended. And the problem really died down a great deal in Dallas County after we got the word out about that. One of the things that I remember very distinctly being asked about, and you can watch it on, because they started videoing that year, being asked about, when we were testifying about the bill, about that it was going to stop people from, going out and canvassing and campaigning. And I had to tell them that it really didn't. The main thrust of House Bill 54 was to take an effort, a step towards removing the anonymity from the people that were involved with mail ballots. The voters were not anonymous because you vote, you register to vote. In other words, the voter's name and address is not anonymous. You know who they are. But the folks that were going around and dealing with the voters, we had no idea who most of them were. And so that's where the idea came from, to require assistants to at least put their name and address on the application to register or the carrier envelope to return it. Now, are there people that went out and did what they were doing before without complying with the statute? I'm sure that there were. I have no doubt that there were. But at that point, they were committing an offense, whereas before, they weren't. There just wasn't one. So that was the theory behind that. And so we began to see, because I remember seeing them at the Elections Department, lots of carrier envelopes and applications coming in, and the assistants were putting down their names and addresses, and so it got it started. And I'll let Bruce address, because he in terms of people calling up his office and complaints about, in terms of, I think it had a positive effect.
Yes, it did. In fact, it probably reduced it by way more than half complaints, maybe even a quarter of the same kind of complaints were coming in versus the ones we had before House Bill 54.
Some of the things in there that, I remember, I understand that the previous speaker was talking about the engaging in organized criminal activity statute. I actually considered that back at the time, but thought that I'd be, at that time anyway, might be reaching too far. One of the things we did put in, though, was at least to rope in Title IV in the Penal Code, which is there and has been there since then, which brought to all of the offenses in the election code the possibility of attempt and conspiracy cases. That just wasn't there before. Once that got in there, then you could do those as well. And so it was just to put more tools in the box, quite frankly, that could be used. That having been said, one of the things I did want to tell the committee is, even you can make good law, but you still got to be careful how you use it. You have to be very careful in how you go out and use those tools that are in there for any number of reasons, but especially in the election area. One of the things that Bruce and I were talking about earlier, and I've preached this to people, the election code is one of an incredible example of a body of law where moving one thing in one place can have an unintended consequence in another place. It is remarkable how hard it is to know of twisting a wheel on one side causes a leak to spring on the other side, or moving a lever over here causes a squeak to start over there. It's the law of unintended consequences with regard to elections is remarkable. So you just have to be very careful what it is you do with it. But that really was the main thrust of House Bill 54, was to remove the anonymity, to take a step towards removing the anonymity from the process, so that if a complaint did come in, if you get a mad voter, that you'd have some hope of going out and have some place to start. Or if the person didn't put their information down, but you could track them down, then you'd have something to work with. One of the other things that's in there was to make it very clear that all of the election records are governmental records, so that you could use tampering with a governmental record if need be. because that it's very clear now, once that got in there, that everything in there was a governmental record. You'd think it would be obvious, but we made it sort of bluntly obvious. And then a portion in there about buying and selling balloting materials an offense, because it wasn't before. It's just the very concept that you would buy or sell actual balloting materials. Just doing that became an offense. And so the idea was to, obviously nobody should be buying and selling it.
It sounds like there's kind of a gray area going on from what someone said earlier about a private company in Dallas. Have you heard anything about that?
I know a little bit about it. I think
Processing.
some of the election, or at least one of the election vendors is offering a service of doing the upfront processing, printing, stuffing, postage, all the insertion, and mailing out. Those ballots still have to come back to the elections department. They still have to go through all of those processes. So it was an upfront mailing service, if you will.
All right.
One of the other points I wanted to make to you, that because you're dealing with voter registration earlier, and now this is mail ballots. One of the big differences between in-person voting and mail ballot voting, in-person voting, in the polling places at least, the identities of the election judge and the election clerks are generally known very well. People that come in, even if they're doing assistance, have to sign. And I realize there's people are going to abuse things, but at least you've got some idea of what's going on. And the ballots get transferred from the elections department to the polling places. There's a whole system of ballot and seal, mechanisms to try to keep a handle on that. With mail ballots, it's very different, because once that thing goes out in the mail, it's gone until it comes back again. And so you've got a situation where the ballot's being interacted with in a venue, typically at the kitchen table or some other such, somewhere in the home, where it's completely outside of a polling place. And so the idea of having extra protections around that, that was part of what we were after with that. Because at that stage, when it's out there, it's outside of the polling place, you don't have the things that you do have in a polling place.
I would like to add, I've always been perplexed about the differences, how we treat voter registration versus absentee by mail. Voter registration, you have to be deputized. You have to go through a certification course. You have to go through all of these hoops to handle a signed voter registration application. For an absentee ballot request, you just have to put your name. You don't have to be on record. So I think really one of the things I've seen is a need to make that equal. If you go back, if you look at HB 2239 in 1995, there was a bill from Representative Danberg that talked about deputy early voting assistants having to go through the same kind of processes to be able to handle a signed legal document, which is the the absentee application. So I don't understand the difference why we treat those two things differently. If it's as important to do it in voter registration, it should be as important to do it for the absentee application process. Then you can put requirements that you meet the requirements to be a registered voter, just like you do to be a deputy voter registrar. And you don't have people that are not citizens or people who are not qualified to go around and assist in the process. Also allows you to identify those people that are going around doing these things maybe a little bit better. So I would hope that the legislature could re-examine that process again and see, should we make that equal on both sides of this equation, so that we at least hold higher standards of people out there doing this process. I also support stronger penalties. I think that would be very helpful. It's a crawl, walk, run type situation. I think we're ready to start walking or running, maybe getting more into that situation. And finally, I just say the annual mail-out process, recent legislation for the absentee applications, I think it's been a very good thing. And it's increased our mail-in process tremendously, but it also has reduced, I think, the door-to-door opportunities to go around knocking on doors, doing that. Both political parties do that quite frequently now in mass mailouts. I think the process is better. I think it could be made a lot better with maybe putting some better identifiers on the people that are doing this process and holding them to a higher standard, but also increasing penalties, I think, would be very much called for.
So the ease of the absentee balloting process is good and it's gotten better, but you just want to make sure if there's some individual going out harvesting multiple absentee ballots, we're pretty loose on that.
I think there should be limits on how many you could do. I see no reason
Right.
why there are no limits on that. Penalties should be strengthened, but also I think that there should be requirements for the people doing this, that they have to at least be certified on record in the elections department, trackable even in a better way than just saying, hey, if you assist somebody, just sign this application or sign this carrier envelope. It just is so open-ended on that, and that is no more important or less important of the process as voter registration, where we require all of these requirements, and then on the voting side, it's just sign this form. It just has never made sense to me. I talked about it in '95. I talked about it multiple times. It's been on a couple of bills since then, but it just has never gotten all the way through the process.
You need to keep trying.
Keep trying, maybe, hopefully.
All right, members, any questions? Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and I have a full confidence in the vote in Collin County.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We're very happy to be there, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our last panel for today, or our last charge, is charge number 5, identifying policy options to improve compliance with campaign finance reporting laws by local officials and candidates for local offices. And we have one person to speak from the Texas Ethics Commission, Natalia Luna Ashley, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And if you want to introduce yourself again.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Luna Ashley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Ethics Commission. Thank you for asking me to be here today to discuss the compliance level of campaign finance reporting obligations at the local level.
And I guess the question is there any compliance?
There is some, and I'll be happy to share some statistics with you. As background, the legislature has given to the Texas Ethics Commission a group of laws to administer and enforce, and one of those laws is the campaign finance law, which is found in Title 15 of the Election Code. And that is a law that requires candidates for members of the legislature to file a campaign treasurer appointment announcing their candidacy, and also to file the campaign finance reports. Well, the same law applies at the local level. It applies to elected officials at all different levels of state government. But some of those are required to file, some of the individuals subject to this law are required to file with the Texas Ethics Commission, and those include the statewide candidates for state legislature, statewide officials that include even district judges and state board of education, along with some others. But the ones that are required to file locally include those who are seeking local offices. So if somebody's running for mayor, they file with the city. If they're running for school board with the city, and so forth. It's hard to know exactly how many candidates and office
Natalia,
holders.
Okay, so if you're running for city council, you file with the city.
That's
if
right.
If you're running
Yes,
for
ma'am.
school board, you file with the school administrative.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So,
Administration.
and then that law even applies to MUD districts. So if you're running for a MUD position or certain special districts, and where, so the district that's calling the election is the proper filing authority under the campaign finance law. And it's really hard to pinpoint how many elected officials are subject to this law. When you look at the number of counties that we have, the 254, we counted the number of elected positions at the county level, and we anticipate that there are about 4,400. At the city level, there are about 7,500. At school district, about 7,000, and so forth. So we estimate that there are about 59,000 elected positions at the local level, When you multiply that by the number of candidates running for those offices, we think that at the minimum, at a given time, there may be about 10,000 individuals subject to the campaign finance law at the local level. So the question, the legislature has given the commission two ways to enforce the campaign finance law. And the first method, this method only applies to those individuals required to file with the Texas Ethics Commission, and that is the method that would require us to send a notice of late report, that their late report was filed, and also assessing the fine that is set under the law. And so the way it works, a report comes in late. We have an automatic system that tells us the report is late, and here's the amount of the fine that's set under the law. We send it to the filer, they pay the fine or request a waiver or reduction of the fine. Now again, this does not apply at the local level. What does apply at the local level and at the state level as well, and this is really the only way that the commission can enforce compliance at the local level, is through the sworn complaint process. So this would require somebody to file a complaint with the commission or for the commission to initiate a complaint. And some violations of the law also constitute a criminal offense, which means that somebody could file a complaint with a local prosecutor because the commission only has civil jurisdiction, which means that they can, assess a fine.
Oh, okay. So, say you're running for county commissioner. You file your reports, but your opponent does not. So you would have to make the complaint to who oversees the county.
So you could file the complaint with a local prosecutor because failing to file a report is a criminal offense. Or you could file a complaint with the Texas Ethics Commission.
Oh, they can file here, but you don't have jurisdiction over it.
Who has civil jurisdiction.
Oh.
So they do, although they file the reports locally, the election code does give the commission the authority to enforce those laws at the local level.
Oh, okay.
And so now shifting it a little bit to compliance, some of the records that we have about compliance at the local level, on a yearly basis, the commission receives hundreds, not thousands, hundreds of complaints. And in fiscal year 2016, 76% of those complaints were filed involving local races. Additionally, the commission issues orders and is required under the statute to post those sworn complaint orders, certain of those orders, on our website. And last fiscal year, 71% of those public orders involved local races as well.
But, okay, like you said, if I'm late, I know exactly how much I'm going to get fined.
Right.
So what happens if, a local filer or a local candidate doesn't file, is late, whatever?
Nothing automatically happens, so it would take somebody, because there's no way that we would know whether somebody filed late at the local level.
Okay, the opponent complains or somebody complains. Then what happens? Do you fine them or what?
So the commission does have the authority to investigate the complaint if the complaint is within the statute of limitations, and they do have the authority to assess up to a $5,000 fine for a violation in the election code. Now, whether or not they would assess that high of a fine is really going to depend on how late the report was, how much activity was disclosed in that report. Was this a first-time candidate who was really trying to do it right and just was confused and eventually did, but did it late? So they would look at different factors, and in some instances they would offer, if it's a first-time offense by a local filer, no activity, they filed a day late, the commission would, under those circumstances, would offer an assurance of voluntary compliance, which is not a public order. It would just be an opportunity to let them know, here's what you're required to do. You agree not to do it again, and then if they do, then the commission would not, treat them the same way. But on the same hand, we do get a lot of complaints from the local level that allege more serious, violations, and 71% of our orders last fiscal year did involve local officials. So the commission became concerned about compliance of the campaign finance laws at the local level last fall, they conducted a survey of the 311 school districts identified as holding an election in May of 2015. And the type of questions that they asked were trying to get at compliance of the campaign finance law. And the chart that is in your packet kind of summarizes some of the findings of our survey. And out of the 311 school districts who could have held an election, 203 held elections, and there were 538 positions in those elections, and actually 812 individuals were on the ballot.
812?
812 names were on the ballot. So that would be the names on the ballot. So there were 312 positions, right? And for those,
Right. Yeah,
and for
these
those
are-
positions, there were opponents. So there were 812, excuse me, on the ballot. And so if you look at just that number, all those 812 should have filed a campaign treasurer appointment. And surprisingly, most of them did. 78% filed a campaign treasurer appointment, which is that very first form that they file. So which means that 22% did not. But 76%.
Wait, they're running for office and they don't file a campaign treasurer?
Well, they didn't file that campaign treasurer appointment. And so that's a great start. The
Madam Chair,
76.
can I ask a question about that?
Oh, Mr. Schofield.
You're required to file a campaign treasurer report in order to spend any money, right? Do these, like for example, the filing fee, do these offices, do people running for school district have to spend any money? Can they just get on a petition and do it? In other words, is it possible that it's not illegal to run without filing the report if you didn't spend any money?
There are two sections in the election code. One that says all candidates have to file a campaign treasurer appointment, and there is not a criminal offense tied to that requirement. There's an additional section in the election code that says all candidates are required to file a campaign treasurer appointment before they spend or accept any money, and that does carry a criminal offense. So so just becoming a candidate triggers the requirement to file a campaign treasurer appointment. I know there has been some discussion in the past whether or not there should be some minimal threshold of spending or accepting of funds that actually triggers that appointment. But current law, if you become a candidate, you have to file a treasurer, even if you don't spend any money. So the criminal offense only kicks in when you actually spend it or accept it without a treasurer on file.
So I think I can
But,
clarify. Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I'm running, I have to file. But if I don't file, I'm in violation of something that holds no criminal penalty. But if I never then spend any money, there's no criminal penalty.
Right.
But there's just a civil penalty.
But anybody who files for any office
Should
that
have
has
to
a
file.
filing
Yeah.
fee,
Well,
by
no,
definition,
right.
had to spend money.
But having coming off a local board years ago, the school board and city councils typically don't. I mean, it depends on the city charter, but a lot of the time it's just, in fact, in the city that I represented, we're now 160,000, so a city of some size, and they didn't even have to get signatures or pay any money. You just file. Now, granted, I didn't like that, but anybody could just go ahead and you're on the ballot. And I have a good question for you too, but while I'm on the mic, can I ask? Okay, thanks.
Yes.
I had a question about the slide here.
Yes.
Interesting. On the footnote, number 1.
Right.
So you're saying that 41% filed timely 30-day reports? Is that
Right.
what that?
So we have, well, we don't know they're timely. We know that they filed. So
Oh.
we know that of those who were required, so only the contested
Okay.
candidates are required to file the 30-day and the 8-day reports, and only 41.3% filed the 30-day report, and then only 37.74% filed the 8-day report. Now, the footnote makes an assumption that if those who filed that initial campaign treasurer appointment,
Okay.
if they are the ones who filed those pre-election reports, it almost seems And that's why we have it in a footnote. If you assume
Right,
that
right.
those who filed the pre-election reports are those who filed that initial form, then that seems to indicate that if we can just get people to file that initial form, that their chances of filing the pre-election reports, increases.
All right. So that's the question I had on this 95% compliance.
Mm-hmm.
This is actual figures from so if are we taking the folks that filed the CTAs
Right.
and following them through the process?
No, this is
we're just assuming.
Yeah,
that. Okay,
right.
yeah, Okay.
Because that would really take.
That's a lot of heavy lifting.
Right. We would have to get all of the reports.
Difficult, but not impossible, but difficult nonetheless.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's my concern, and that's what I see a lot of the time, because we get drawn into these things, whether it's a school board race or a city council race. People will complain, whether they're partisans or actual candidates themselves will say, hey, so-and-so didn't even file their 30-day report. They didn't even file. And then the Ethics Commission says they can't do anything, their hands are tied, because they need a sworn complaint. And a lot of people don't want to get that involved where they swear the complaint. So there's, this person that's not following the law, nothing ever happens to them. So my real question is, what can we do to remedy that without overburdening the TEC?
I will say that the commission initiated 22 complaints as a result of some of the findings, but when you look, and 20 of those orders are posted on the commission website saying, the commission initiated the complaints at the local level. But when you see the number of candidates at the local level, is where and the commission is continuing to look at, okay, where are the potential problem areas without picking in any part of the state, and so we can go and try to initiate some complaints to try to improve compliance at the local level. But we really do believe in that if we could just get in touch with those candidates and let them know that about their filing obligations. So here, but we don't know, we don't have their contact information to communicate with them directly, but here are the things that we do to try to communicate with them. And then I have some ideas on what could change to better be able to communicate with them. But we have a whole section on our website, so that's also on the handout, that is specifically for local filers and local filing authorities to kind of help them. When you click on that, you get a customized page of the different forms that apply to them, the guides that are directed at them. After the survey, the commissioners thought, our guides are too complicated. We need a 1.5 page instruction on how to start off the election. We thought, okay. So we worked on this. I know it looks really simple, but we really did work on it for a long time, trying to tailor for local candidates running for school district, because we see a lot of problems there, cities, counties, and others. Just a one-page document saying, here are the first steps that you need to get it right. And we sent this to the local filing authorities. We emailed it to them, say, we're trying to improve compliance at the local level. Help us reach out to your candidates. Please distribute this. So we did that. We got some good feedback. We also have held training sessions throughout the state. We held 2, one in San Antonio this year and another in Louisville. We had hundreds of people attend, and we invited the local community, local candidates and office holders, and many did attend. And we also participate in the Secretary of State. They hold some great conferences, and they're very generous in that they allow us a time slot to go and speak to the local office holders, and we do, and hopefully that gets the word out as well. And then also we answer telephone calls. Although they do not file with us, we get on a yearly basis, thousands and thousands of calls from local filers just trying to get it right. And so we do recognize that the challenge is, how to reach out to them. Sometimes they find themselves involved in our sworn complaint process, and they say, well, I never knew that I needed to do this. So possible suggestions, as I was asked to bring some possible options for you to consider, is to require the filing application to get their name on the ballot. I took a look at that, and there's a provision in the election code that sets out the things that the application has to include. Perhaps consider adding a sentence just in which the applicant acknowledges that they are aware of their filing obligations as a candidate under the campaign finance law, and that failure to do so could have civil or criminal penalties or something like that. And that would be an amendment to section 141.031 of the election code. So that is one option. Another option would be to require the local filing authorities to link to the Texas Ethics Commission's website that has to this particular place, because a lot of them do provide a link to our website, but we do have a lot of different filers, so it might take them a while to figure out where they need to go and look for what applies to them. So that's another suggestion. Another would be to hold more training sessions tailored specifically for campaign finance law. Our training sessions have been a mixture of campaign finance law, personal financial statement, and the gift laws. So and we're starting to do that. Next year we have 2 dates set aside where we're going to do half-day training specifically for campaign finance, and again, and invite the people in the candidates and office holders in the local area, hoping that this will improve compliance. And maybe we do communicate with local filing authorities by email and once a year, and that's something that we could increase to twice a year. I think 3 times a year would then be probably not productive. But so those are some suggestions that you may want to consider.
Did you put that in writing by any chance?
I can give my written comments to Catherine.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Then
Yes. Okay. All right.
Question?
Okay. Rep. Fallon.
Thank you. I just want to walk through this. Let's say, because again, I'm being aware of a lot of these instances that happen. You have a local filer, say city council, they do not file. They lose the election, and they didn't file at all. They spent a bunch of money. They did file a CTA, but they've spent money. They never filed the campaign finance reports, which happens quite often. And then somebody does a sworn complaint on them, and you find that that's indeed the case. Are they going to get what's a typical fine? Are they going to be fined? And is it $500? Is that?
Well, so the amount of the fine really does vary. So the commission adopted it's a technical or de minimis rule as required. The legislature required the commission to do so, and under that technical or de minimis rule, if certain thresholds are not exceeded, for example, if this is the first report that somebody has filed late, if it has activity that's underneath a certain threshold, there's a whole list of things that if they meet that standard, then they would qualify for what's called an assurance of voluntary compliance at the staff level. And that's something that also the commission initiated to try to speed up the processing of complaints. The staff could propose up to a $500 fine to this filer and would offer them this proposal. If they agree, then the complaint is done. If they disagree with the staff's proposal, then it goes to the commission. But as far as yes, if there's a clear violation, then the commission could determine what the level of the fine. And the level of the fine is really going to depend on the level of activity.
Sure.
And so if it's minimal activity, and we see that a lot from school district races where they have very little activity, but of course there are others who have a lot. So it's hard to say specifically, without more facts, exactly what the fine would be. Because
if they never file, it'd be awfully hard to know how much they spent. Whether they could claim it's $1,000, but it could be $30,000, we'd never know.
And certainly, if they never file, that is a factor that goes into determining the amount of the fine. The amount of the fine is more likely to be much higher if they never file than if they file and the commission's able to view the level of activity in the report.
Oh, and then let's say this person, whether they held office or not, they lose and they don't have any intention of running again, and you all fine them, say, $1,000. What if they just don't pay? What happens at that point?
So if they do not pay, the commission can issue a final order and then refer the matter to the Attorney General's office for collection. And the Attorney General's office has a collections division that has been doing an awesome job collecting fines on behalf of the agency.
They can garnish their wages? Yeah.
Well, and sometimes they're not able, the respondent is just not able to pay because they may not have the means to do so, and they will be deemed uncollectible. But then if they go to get a mortgage, for example, or if they want to go to school and get a school loan, they won't, they'll have to deal with that fine
Good.
first.
Okay.
So,
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Welcome, thank you.
Okay, so this concludes the charges for today. Any comments? Thank y'all for being here. Really appreciate it. Okay, so there being no further business before us, the House Committee on Elections is now adjourned, subject to the call of the chair. Thank y'all.